It's just been Noah and me since his dad passed in a car accident when Noah was 3. I really tried to be both mom and dad, but between working 3 jobs just to get by in LA and keeping up with his school, I barely had any time to spend with him. So, when the Soccer World Cup semifinal came to town, I jumped on those tickets. It was the week of Noah's 8th birthday, so I figured this would be the ultimate surprise for him as well. My kid's been obsessed with soccer since he was 4, ever since his uncle put a game on and Noah sat there 6 inches from the screen for the full 90 minutes, without even blinking. The morning we left for SoFi, he was up before 6. He had his jersey on and even made me take a bunch of photos of him in front of the car before we even left the driveway. Our seats weren't exactly front row, but we didn't care. Noah spent pretty much the whole first half standing on his chair so he could see better. Honestly, watching him was way more entertaining than the actual game. He was totally locked in, grabbing my arm every time someone almost scored, calling out every player by name and rambling on about their plays like a mini-coach. By the time halftime rolled around, we were both starving. The line at the nearest concession stand was already snaking back into the aisle. I told him I was going to quickly run and grab something, but he needed to stay in his seat.
Do not move an inch. I'll be quick and keep an eye on you, okay?
I made him look at me when I said it. Okay, Mom. He nodded and went back to watching the replay screen. The concession area was way worse than I thought. It was a total traffic jam at the entrance. People were shoving each other, and the line was barely moving. I kept trying to look back towards our seats, but about 10 minutes in, I couldn't see our row from where I was anymore. I kept reassuring myself that Noah was fine. There were people around him and he was old enough to take care of himself, but I still felt uneasy. It took me 15 minutes to fight my way back with the popcorn and drinks. When I finally got there, my seat was empty. My palms immediately started sweating as I looked around at the rows, the aisle, and the concourse behind me. I shouted his name. The woman right next to our seats looked up.
Have you seen my son? He's this tall and he's in the red jersey. Oh, the kid? He went towards the exit tunnel with his dad. Your man said he'd get him some ice cream.
My eyes widened and my blood went cold. I spotted them before she could even finish her sentence. Noah was heading straight for the tunnel, holding hands with some guy I didn't recognize. The man was wearing one of those dark blue stadium jackets you see at every merch booth. Instead of running or doing anything suspicious, he was walking like he really was Noah's father. My son was looking up at him, chatting away innocently. I lost it and screamed Noah's name at the top of my lungs. Noah whipped his head around, but the guy didn't even slow down. He gave one quick glance back before dragging Noah into the corridor and picking up the pace as they disappeared. I climbed over the seats in front of me to get there faster. I sprinted down the corridor, through the ramp, and into the dim half-light of the parking structure. My lungs were on fire, and my heart was pounding, but I didn't stop. My son needed me. The noise from the crowd inside the stadium became muffled. Everything got quieter and darker at the same time. They were about 30 feet ahead of me. I screamed Noah's name again, and this time he tried to stop and turn around, but the man yanked his arm and pulled him forward without breaking stride. I caught up to them in the parking garage and grabbed Noah's free arm. I yanked hard. My son started crying, completely freaked out and confused. The guy dug his fingers into Noah's arm, and my son let out a scream that made my skin crawl. I swung for the guy's gut, but he was too quick. He clocked me right in the jaw. I heard a crack, and everything went white for a second as pain exploded through my face. I barely had enough time to react before he landed another punch straight to my nose. I'd never been hit that hard. I slammed sideways into a car and immediately tasted blood. My vision flickered. Noah was screaming somewhere nearby. The guy had him again and was trying to drag him off, but I had my hand locked onto Noah's sleeve, and I wasn't letting go for anything. He turned back, ready to hit me again, when suddenly headlights flashed around the corner as a couple of cars pulled in. The guy glanced at the lights and let go of Noah's hand. He swore under his breath and disappeared between 2 cars. I heard his footsteps for a heartbeat before silence fell. I dropped to the ground and held Noah. My nose was bleeding all over his jersey, and he was shaking. I kept holding him until the people from those cars finally reached us. The man called the cops, while the woman helped me stop the bleeding. The police showed up and took our statements. They checked the parking garage footage and got a fuzzy picture of the guy's face, but nothing clear enough to identify him. It's been almost 2 years now, and as far as I know, they never found him. Noah still plays soccer. His love for the game won't let him stop. We haven't talked about that day in a long time, and I don't push it. But he hates crowds now and sticks close to me in public. Sometimes when I go to grab his hand, he grabs mine first. I know he's trying to get over it, but it's hard for a kid that young to process the darkness that filthy stranger showed him. I'm just grateful my son only got a glimpse of it and not the full picture. I grew up in Harmony Creek, Indiana, one of those small towns where the Welcome To sign is basically the only landmark. My mom, Kathy, ran the town's bakery, and my dad, Leonard, was a maintenance supervisor at the chemical plant down by the river. But even when I was a little girl, he made me feel weird in a way I couldn't explain. He hugged me every chance he got, sometimes sliding his hand across my back or thigh. It made my skin crawl. His pecks on the cheek, which looked harmless to everyone else, felt wet and invasive. Once I hit middle school, my friends pretty much stopped coming over. They always had excuses about why they couldn't hang out at my place, but I knew the real reason. He was my dad. When I tried to tell Mom, she instantly got defensive and waved it off, saying he was just an affectionate father looking after me. So I shut up and learned to disappear inside my own home, avoiding him like the plague. The minute I turned 18, I bounced and cut him off so completely that Mom became my only link to that life. Soon enough, school, internships, and jobs consumed me, and I honestly forgot all about him. We had miles between us. I was finally settled in my own place and even had a boyfriend, Matthew, whom I'd met online and was planning to finally meet in person in a couple of months. Then, one Saturday in August, I got the call that Mom had suffered a stroke and died. The memorial service was the following week. I knew I had to go back. I reluctantly booked a flight and packed a bag. The visit somehow fell on Father's Day, so I even bought him a couple of gifts to keep the peace. When I got there, he looked way older and more fragile than I remembered. He spent most of his time cooped up in a messy upstairs office surrounded by computer screens. When I asked about it, he said he was working on coding projects for an internet forum. For the first half of the visit, things actually felt okay. We spent hours talking about Mom, sharing memories and sobbing together. I started to wonder if getting older and being alone had finally softened him. By evening, though, the mood totally shifted. He wouldn't stop staring at me and started digging into my life and my boyfriend back in Seattle, asking how we met and how serious things were. I gave him the standard daughter-to-father answers, but he kept pushing with invasive, deeply personal questions until I finally snapped.
Are you crazy? What kind of father snoops around his daughter's life like this?
The kind who's looking out for his girl. I've got every right to know who you're planning to settle down with, Ramona. Especially if they want to see you dressed in some bovine costume.
He grinned. Disgust washed over me. I stood up and told him I was leaving, and that this whole trip had been a mistake. He blocked the doorway.
Sit down. We need to talk.
Move!
He shook his head and let out a hollow, creepy laugh.
Oh, your innocence really did it for me. There's something you should know about your boyfriend.
What are you talking about?
Matthew doesn't exist, Ramona. He's not real. He never was.
I froze.
You're insane.
Am I?
He slid his laptop closer, showing me the chat history and pictures from all my late-night conversations with Matthew, including the ones where we discussed our fantasies and he'd made me get off.
I made him up 8 years ago.
I couldn't breathe.
You're lying.
I'm not.
He started reading our chats out loud, including the private parts, sexual confessions, fantasies, and insecurities I'd shared with a man I believe cared about me. My eyes welled with tears.
Why?
To protect you, Ramona. You were picking the wrong men. I had to guide you, show you what a real relationship looks like. Teach you things so you'd become a real woman.
You're sick.
I did this for you!
His voice rose with every word.
Everything I've done has been for you. Since you were a child, I've watched you and cared for you and loved you. And you ran away. I had to find a way back.
I ran for the door. He grabbed my arm and pulled me back.
Don't leave. We can talk about this. We'd be perfect together. You know I can make you feel.
I shoved him hard. He stumbled backward, lost his balance, and fell down the staircase. I heard him hit the bottom and groan, but I didn't stop or check on him. I grabbed my bag, got in my car, and drove away. A week later, neighbors called and said Leonard had vanished. Nobody had seen him since my visit. His house was empty, and his car was gone. They asked if I knew where he was, and I said no. They asked if I could help search for him. I refused. They thought I was cold and unfeeling. They didn't know what he'd done, or what he'd been doing my entire life. I scrubbed every trace of him from my life. I deleted the profiles, nuked the chat logs, and blocked the fake account. I tried to bury the fact that I'd ever let him in and shared parts of myself I'd never shown another living soul. The cops never found him. He just vanished. Part of me is convinced he's still out there, lurking behind a screen, crafting a new identity just to crawl back into my life. But I'll never let him. Because I learned my lesson the hard way. I'm done with the apps, done with the games. I don't trust a soul I haven't looked dead in the eye. And even then, I'm searching for the rot underneath. Unfortunately, I'm one of those women who learned way too early just how filthy a man can be. How their hunger doesn't give a damn about bloodlines or boundaries. To them, family is just another word for easy target. And I'm putting this out there so you won't become one. Be careful, ladies.
Let me go, Mark. Please.
You know I love you too much for that. I'm just trying to keep you safe. He giggled. I wiggled in the chair and twisted my wrists. Sobbing, I fought the zip ties digging into my skin, but the plastic had already cut through in one spot, and I could feel the warm blood against my palm. It didn't bother the guy I'd been married to for 7 years, though. Mark crouched down, tilted his head, and blew a strand of hair off my face. He was grinning ear to ear. I know it hurts, but I can't ever let you leave, Mom. We're forever, remember? He reached up to tuck my hair behind my ear. My 37-year-old husband had never acted like this. He used to be a good husband and regular grown-up until 4 months back I made this whole nightmare happen. Mark and I met 10 years ago in grad school and started dating. And 2 years after I graduated, he proposed. We got married in his hometown of Miami and built a life together since then. But a couple of years ago, our marriage started falling apart. We'd fight over the stupidest things, like how hot his eggs were supposed to be. Mark started coming home late, and I buried myself in work. On our 6th anniversary, I found out about Diane. When I confronted him, he didn't even try denying it. I like her, Stacy. It's time you get that there's no us anymore. I think it's time we go our separate ways and do what makes us happy. I tried defending our marriage. He said he'd already made up his mind. The argument got so loud that he hurled his phone across the wall and stormed out. I spent the rest of the night crying by the fireplace until I couldn't anymore. Around 2 in the morning, I noticed this grocery bag sitting by the fireplace that I didn't remember even bringing in. I'd grabbed it, hoping it'd have some snacks. Instead, I found a small toy that looked like a bundle of dried twigs tied with twine. It had a tiny hand-painted face near the top. I turned it over and found a folded paper tag attached to it.
I'm a one-wish willow. Make a wish, snap me in half. Your wish will be granted.
It read. I was exhausted and heartbroken, and I wasn't thinking straight. I held it with both hands and wished to be a mom, figuring if we had a kid, Mark would stick around. Then, I snapped the thing in half. The next morning, Mark woke me up with a hug harder than he had in forever, said he was sorry and he wasn't going anywhere. I was totally thrilled. I seriously thought that magical willow had worked wonders. We spent the whole day shopping and watching movies. Mark kept telling me how much he loved me. That evening, we were in the kitchen when he asked if we had any more chocolate syrup.
Yeah, honey. Here you go.
Thanks, Mom. I froze. I stared at him, waiting for him to crack up, but he was too focused on decorating the pancakes. I brushed it off, figuring it was just a slip of the tongue, but it kept happening. My husband started behaving like a kid. He wouldn't do anything without clearing it with me first. If I were in another room for too long, he'd pop up in the doorway, looking totally anxious. He even started sticking notes on the fridge, asking if it was okay to go to the store or work late. One night, he actually cried because I went to bed before him. He sat outside our bedroom door and knocked until I came out. When I opened it, he was curled up on the floor, hugging his knees, with tears all over his face, asking why I didn't say goodnight. I was horrified. I found the 2 broken pieces of the willow tucked in my jewelry box a few weeks later and started looking for answers online. Every forum thread and post I found said the same thing. A wish, once made, could not be undone, and the willow grants wishes literally rather than as intended. I had wished to become a mother so Mark wouldn't leave, and I had. Honestly, I felt terrible for doing it to Mark, so I tried sticking by, but he was getting worse by the minute. He wouldn't eat, sleep, or breathe unless I was right there. If I ever tried to set a boundary, he'd turn violent. I tried everything I could think of to break this curse or whatever it was. We even saw a shrink who suggested it might be best if Mark took a little break from me. So, last week, while he was glued to a soccer game, I finally packed a bag and tried living. I had a plan to crash at my friend Karen's place, and I made sure to stick those 2 broken pieces of the willow in my coat pocket. I was too scared to leave them behind. I was tiptoeing my way out of the kitchen when a soft sob stopped me in my tracks. You were seriously going to leave without even saying bye? Moms don't bail. I turned to find Mark sitting in the dark, clutching Karen's address from my nightstand. Before I could even blink, he tackled me to the floor. I tried fighting back, but he zip-tied my wrists to a chair. I tried talking some sense into him. I even showed him the broken willow, but he totally blocked it out. All he kept saying was that we'd be together forever. I was his mom, and only death could separate us. The willow is still in my pocket. My stupid wish is granted perfectly. I got to be a mom, but instead of having a kid, my cheating husband became one. I still don't know if I'd ever be able to break this curse, or I'll end up trapped for the rest of my life with this possessive, childlike version of the guy I used to love. Despite the many years that have passed, I can never forget the horrors I witnessed at Redwood Amusement Park. I can still remember the rotting corpses and the pungent smell of death. I never could have imagined something this horrific could happen in an amusement park, and the memory still haunts me to this very day. It all started after I'd been hired as the park's new manager. Visits to the amusement park had been dwindling over the years, and the owners asked me to set up new attractions that would draw people back to the park. During my search for a new popular attraction that would increase visits to Redwood Amusement Park, I came across a man named Dmitri. Dmitri was a Russian wax sculptor who specialized in wax figures and wax art. He assured me that he could build the most popular attraction at the park, saying, "Trust me when I tell you this, Mr. William. I'll create an attraction at Redwood Amusement Park that will attract visitors from across the country." I wasn't convinced, so I said, "Are you sure?" They're just wax figures, and I don't think people would choose that over a new roller coaster, a retro carnival ride, or a funhouse. Dimitri then looked me dead in the eyes and said, "These are not just any wax figures, Mr. William. They are pristine works of art that will boggle the mind and entice anyone who sees them." I still wasn't sure this was the attraction that would revive the park, but I knew it was going to be much cheaper than new roller coasters, so I gave Dimitri the job. It took him a couple of months to put it all together, and when it was finished, Dimitri's work left me completely speechless. The attraction was called the Wax Palace, and it was truly something to behold. Everything from the furniture to the decorations appeared to be made entirely of wax, and you couldn't really tell what was real and what was wax. I couldn't help but second-guess every object Dimitri had placed inside the Wax Palace, as they were nearly perfect renditions. However, the stars of the show were the disturbingly lifelike wax statues. It felt like my eyes were playing tricks on me, as I didn't know if the people standing around me were human or statues. Dimitri had managed to create something beyond the uncanny valley with these statues, as it was difficult to tell if they were made of wax or human flesh. The new Wax Palace attraction was a massive success on the night it opened, and in the end, Dimitri was right, as a large number of people visited the palace, trying to figure out if the wax statues were actually real people. During the months that followed, several pictures of the Wax Palace circulated online, and the attraction grew even more popular. Due to its growing popularity, Dimitri consistently sculpted new wax figures every month. He would then give them names before adding them to the Wax Palace to keep things fresh and interesting. It was all going great at first, as the owners were thrilled with the new attraction, and I'd managed to triple visits to the park. However, everything changed when I saw something I was never meant to see. I'd accidentally left my house keys at the office that night, so I went back to the amusement park to get them. After I'd picked them up from my desk, I made my way toward the exit, but I heard some strange noises outside. I looked at my watch, and it was exactly 12:06 a.m. Everyone had gone home, including the staff, after the park had closed at 10:30 p.m., and I wondered who could have been out there this late at night. So I went to investigate. It didn't take long before I came across a large black van. Dimitri was driving the van towards the Wax Palace, and he'd parked it before going inside. There was a nauseating smell coming from the back, and when I opened it, I threw up everything I'd had for dinner. It took me a few seconds to understand what I was looking at, but there were heaps of embalmed corpses sitting in the back of Dimitri's van. I couldn't believe my eyes, and when I saw him coming out of the Wax Palace, I confronted him immediately, screaming, "Dimitri, what the hell is this?" "Oh, Mr. William, I thought you left. You weren't supposed to see this."
What have you done? Why do you have all these corpses in the back of your van?
"I apologize for the smell, Mr. William. They've only been embalmed, but once I carry out the plastination process and clear out their eye sockets, those corpses will transform into the lifelike wax figurines that everyone loves." I held back the urge to throw up again, as I said,
"You sick freak! I'm calling the police!"
However, before I could even take out my phone, Dimitri lunged toward me and wrapped his arms around my throat. I tried to fight back, but Dimitri was a much larger man than I was. It became hard to breathe, and I thrashed around trying to find something, anything that I could use as a weapon. As he tightened his hands around my throat, Dimitri looked at me with no remorse as he said, "Fear not, William, for even in death, your corpse will live again as one of my creations. Rather than rotting away in the ground, feeding the maggots, you will become true art." Before I could pass out, I'd managed to reach my house keys in my pocket, so I quickly grabbed them and stabbed Dimitri in the neck. I ran out of there calling the cops, and after a couple of minutes, the authorities surrounded the park. After Dimitri was taken into custody, an in-depth investigation was carried out into his wax figures, and the authorities uncovered even more horrific atrocities. detectives discovered a disturbing number of corpses inside Dimitri's home. A majority of the bodies had been embalmed before undergoing a plastination-like preservation process. The gruesome procedure involved bodily fluids and fat being removed and replaced with silicone-based polymers. Detectives later stated that the procedure significantly slowed decomposition, allowing the nearly odorless corpses to remain disturbingly lifelike for years. They also discovered that the corpses' eyes had been removed and replaced with hyper-realistic acrylic prosthetics. This small detail was a key step in keeping suspicion low, as human eyes are incredibly difficult to preserve. This twisted form of human taxidermy was how Dimitri achieved his lifelike wax figures, and he confessed to everything during his interrogation. He also told investigators that after the morbid process was complete, the corpses were coated with wax and placed inside the wax palace every month. The victims were all missing persons from Russia and Eastern Europe. Most of the identified corpses had suspected ties to organized crime, as their deaths had been linked to the Russian mafia. Detectives believed Dimitri, who had previously worked for the mafia as a disposer, had originally been tasked with getting rid of the bodies, but repurposed the corpses instead. The amusement park was shut down immediately after the horrific details were finally revealed to the public. In the end, even though all the victims have been put to rest, I'm still haunted by those corpses and Dimitri's horrific acts. Ever since that day, I've kept having this reoccurring nightmare where Dimitri slowly peels off my skin before covering me in hot wax and placing my body inside the wax palace to serve as a morbid attraction in his own. I was only 19 when I landed my first gig doing admin stuff at Mission Bay Aquatic Park in San Diego. The water park was super popular amongst kids, so we literally had hundreds of families and kids coming through every single day. My job was mainly scanning tickets and helping out guests. It was totally nuts, but I seriously loved seeing all the kids having the time of their lives. The first week was a whirlwind, with so many staff members and new faces to keep track of. That's probably why it took me a few days to even notice the guy. He was a lifeguard who always stood near the lazy river. He wore the standard uniform with red shorts and a white shirt, with the park logo and whistle around his neck, but he gave off creepy vibes to me. His uniform looked faded, like it was old and outdated, and he never rotated positions like the other lifeguards did. They switched every hour to different stations and different pools, but this guy always stayed at the lazy river. I'd seen him every shift in the same spot and the same position. I thought maybe he was old in the job and was above the rules. But I still paid attention and started noticing his interactions with the kids. He'd pull them aside and tell them they needed a safety check. He'd go through their pockets while talking to them. He'd ask where their parents were and keep them talking longer than necessary. The kids would look uncomfortable, but he'd keep going, asking questions. I mentioned it to another employee. They shrugged and said maybe he was just being thorough, but it didn't feel thorough. It felt wrong. A few days later, I finally worked up the nerve to mention it to my supervisor. I described the guy, the faded uniform, the lazy river, and the way he talked to kids. My supervisor frowned and pulled up the staff list on her computer.
What's his name?
I realized I didn't know. I'd never seen a name tag on him.
Describe him again.
I told her whatever I remembered. He was pretty tall, probably in his late 40s, balding on top and rocking a gut. His eyes were all squinty, and he had this nasty smirk that made your skin crawl. She kept scrolling and checked every lifeguard on the roster.
Nobody like that works here, Susie. You sure about it?
My stomach dropped.
Absolutely. I've seen him every shift for a week.
She looked concerned.
Show me.
We walked to the lazy river and I scanned the area, but couldn't spot him.
He's always here, Zen, I swear.
We waited and checked the other pools and asked other staff if they'd seen him. Nobody had. It was like he'd vanished. My supervisor told me to report it immediately if I saw him again, and that if someone was impersonating staff, they needed to know. I went back to my station and kept looking over my shoulder, but it was as if the earth had swallowed him. His absence should have relaxed me. Instead, it freaked me out. Later that day, I was walking past a restricted maintenance staff-only area behind the wave pool when the faint voices of a man and a little girl halted my steps. I paused and peeked around the corner. He was crouched down next to a young girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old. She was standing near a gate, the only one staff can use to get to the back areas, maintenance tunnels, and storage. Basically, places where no guests ever go. "Your parents are inside, sweetie. They asked me to bring you to them. They're waiting." He was pointing through the gate. The girl hesitated and looked at the gate, and then back at him. She seemed unsure. I had had enough. Without wasting a second, I ran over.
Hey! What's going on?
The man immediately stiffened and stood up. The girl looked at me with relief in her eyes. I reached her and she grabbed my arm.
Do you know him?
She shook her head. I pulled her behind me and looked at the man.
You need to leave. Now.
Just helping out. She seemed lost. He smiled.
She's not going anywhere with you.
I pulled out my radio and called security. His expression changed and the smile dropped. He realized he was caught. He turned and started walking fast, trying to slip away. I followed but kept a safe distance. I only wanted to keep him in sight. Security showed up within minutes with 2 guards. They saw him and called out. He tried to run. They caught him and detained him right there. They searched his bag and found candy, extra clothes, and a fake badge identical to the real staff badges. He wasn't a lifeguard and never had been. He'd been posting as one to blend in and target kids. Police arrived and took him away. The little girl's parents were found. They'd been looking for her and didn't know she'd been approached or how close she came. The officers asked me questions. I told them everything. They said he'd been doing this for weeks and moving between water parks and wearing fake uniforms and posing as staff. They found evidence in his car, maps of different parks and fake badges for each one, and lists of peak hours when parks were most crowded, when it would be easiest to blend in and approach kids without being noticed. I didn't want to ask what he did to them or what his intentions were with the girl. I might be only 19, but I wasn't naive enough to not know. The gig ended as the seasons changed, but the whole episode lingered. It's really disturbing how normal he looked and how casually he behaved, as if he belonged. And if I hadn't noticed the small things, he would have taken that girl and would have led her through the gate, and nobody would have known until it was really too late. If you'd asked me before last year, I would have said I had a pretty great life. I was a freight rail worker out of Alexandria, pulling brutal overnight runs through Virginia and West Virginia. The money was good enough that my wife could stay home with our 9-year-old son, Eli, and fill in where I couldn't. I knew I was missing a lot, but I honestly thought we were fine. We'd been married for 12 years, and we had so many magnets from our family trips that we had to upgrade to a bigger fridge. Every summer, we went camping near Shenandoah because Eli loved it. Then, one Tuesday in January, my train got canceled outside Charlottesville, and I headed home way earlier than expected, only to find a pickup truck in my driveway that I didn't recognize. The divorce was finalized in March. By May, I'd settled into a 2-bedroom apartment downtown that already had a set of bunk beds bolted in, which meant Eli would have something ready for him when he came over on the weekends. I was doing everything I could to make the transition easier on him, but most of it felt useless. So when Father's Day weekend rolled around, I packed up the truck, picked him up from school, and told him we were getting out of the city for a few days. Eli stayed quiet for most of the drive, but once the tent was up and the fire was going, he finally loosened up. We spent the night roasting marshmallows while he grilled me about animals and argued with me over the stars. I remember sitting there thinking, this is exactly what we needed. I should have trusted my gut when it told me something bad was about to happen. That first night, Eli was out cold after the hike and all the sugar. I stayed up by the fire a while longer, watching it burn down. It was way past midnight and dead quiet, as if even the bugs had fallen asleep. Then, I heard it. A slow, heavy dragging sound coming from the trees a few yards away, like something large was being hauled across the dirt. I grabbed my flashlight and aimed it towards the woods, but I couldn't see anything. I tried to tell myself it was just an animal dragging a kill. I'd spent enough time outdoors to know how the woods worked. Still, I could feel eyes on me. I white-knuckled my hatchet and waited, my heart hammering in my chest. But after 10 minutes of nothing, I figured I was just being paranoid. I let out a shaky breath and turned to crawl into the tent when a gust of wind hit my back, followed by a raspy whisper.
Happy Father's Day.
The voice was low and came from somewhere beyond the reach of my flashlight. My blood turned to ice, and I sat there frozen for what felt like forever, waiting. But the woods went silent again. Not a single leaf moved. I tried convincing myself I was hearing things. Maybe it was another camper farther down the trail, or maybe the wind was playing tricks through the trees. Still, I kept the hatchet beside my sleeping bag for the rest of the night. The whisper came 2 more times before sunrise. It moved around us, like someone pacing in a slow circle around the tent. But I never heard a single footstep. By the time the sky started turning gray, I was a complete wreck. When Eli finally stirred awake, we took a quick lap around the campsite to make sure everything was okay. The front looked normal enough, but when we rounded to the back of the tent, my stomach dropped and Eli screamed. 3 dead animals dangled from the branches a few feet away. 2 were raccoons, but the third was so mangled I couldn't even tell what it had once been. They were strung up with wire and gutted clean. There was no way I'd missed them the night before. I'd literally hung our food bag in those same trees before turning in. I immediately told Eli to pack up. He could tell something was wrong, but he didn't argue. He helped me break down the tent and clean the campsite in near silence. By the time we made it back to the truck, someone had slashed every one of our tires. That feeling of being watched came crawling back. I shoved Eli behind the truck and pulled out my phone, but before I could dial 911, somebody tackled me from behind. The wind got knocked clean out of me, and I slammed hard into the dirt. The man was huge and covered in filth. His face was buried beneath a massive, matted beard. He looked like some wild animal wearing human skin, like he'd been living deep in the woods for years. Before I could react, he drove a hunting knife straight into my left forearm. A raw scream tore out of me. The pain was immediate and blinding. I grunted and tried to fight him off, but he didn't ease up. He yanked the knife free and raised it to stab me again. I grabbed a fistful of dirt and gravel and threw it directly into his eyes. He screamed and stumbled backward, clawing at his face. I scrambled to my feet, yanked the hatchet out of the gear bag, and swung it as hard as I could. I hit him again and again, until the final strike landed with a sickening thud, and he finally collapsed. Then I grabbed Eli and we ran. We reached the highway in maybe 20 minutes. A trucker eventually stopped and called 911, while Eli sat beside me, shaking so hard his teeth chattered. By the time the police arrived, the campsite was empty. They found the carcasses and the hunting knife, though. Later, they told me the man matched the description of a drifter wanted in 2 similar attacks on campers at other parks, both during holiday weekends. Both victims had been fathers traveling with their children. They never found his body. I got 8 stitches, and Eli shook for days afterward. He doesn't like camping anymore. Now he prefers places crowded with people because he understands something most kids never should. The handcuffs cut into my skin as the cop yanked me forward.
Keep moving, kid.
She hissed. Everyone cleared my path while I walked right through the middle with officers and teaching staff all around me. By the time we hit the main corridor, the bell had rung, and the entire school was moving to watch me get arrested. Hundreds of kids poured out of class with their phones up. Girls were gossiping about me. Boys were checking me out. All those camera clicks were bouncing off the walls. Every single person in that place was staring. Attention was exactly what brought me here. I just never thought it would end up wrecking my life like this. I had been a ghost at Hargrove Hive since the day I had joined it. Until the freshman year, Viola Matthews showed up on an exchange program. She was a French exchange student who was already low-key TikTok famous back home. In a week, she built her clique and started trashing people in front of the popular crowd. By week 2, I was one of her favorite targets. It started with her trashing my sneakers one day, and then my outfit the next. Since I didn't fight back, she moved right on to criticizing my body. The day I worked up the guts to tell her to quit it, or I was going to report her, she looked at me, scrunched her nose, and said,
Honestly, I can't tell if you're actually a pig or trying to method act for a farm movie. Someone open a window. The stench is tragic.
Her clique started snickering, and I bolted for the library before anyone could see my face. After that, I went out of my way to avoid her. It was never the kind of stuff a teacher would catch, but her comments were mean enough to sting. 2 days before the cops came for me, I was heading to my usual spot in the back for lunch, trying to stay under the radar. I had my tray loaded with red sauce pasta and chocolate milk. Out of nowhere, Viola pivoted and slammed into me so hard that the whole tray flipped, drenching my pink blouse in sauce and milk. For a second, the whole cafeteria went dead silent before the place exploded. Her friends started laughing and clapping. When I finally found my voice and told her she needed to apologize, she rolled her eyes.
Don't be so dramatic. You should thank your stars you gotta touch me. Just do us all a favor and delete yourself already.
The tray slipped from my numb fingers and clattered onto the floor, sending the rest of the pasta flying. Without waiting for the next laugh, I turned and bolted, pushing through the double doors and sprinting straight out of the building. I didn't stop until I made it outside. I started walking aimlessly, with tears streaming down my face. Suddenly, I ended up in front of this old antique shop on Collier Street. The guy behind the counter looked like he was in his 70s, with white hair and a really calm vibe. He saw me and waved me inside. He asked what I was looking for. We got to talking and I vented about how tired I was of being in the shadow and how I wished I could change it. He kept nodding and handed me a little bundle of dried twigs tied together. It had a tiny face painted on it and a little handwritten tag attached. It's a one-wish willow. Snap it in half after making a wish, and your wish will be granted.
How much?
Only $4. I paid and took it home. After dinner, I sat on my bedroom floor and thought about exactly what I wanted.
I want to walk through hallways and have people stare at me. They should pull out their phones and click snaps. I should be all they could talk about for months.
I snapped the willow and went to sleep. The next morning started off like any other day. I sat through my first 2 classes, waiting for something big to happen, but nothing did. I was honestly starting to feel like a total idiot for blowing $4 on a bunch of sticks. Just then, I caught people whispering behind my back.
She ran out crying in the rain over stupid pasta. I mean, all she had to do was wash or change. She's such a loser.
When I heard them laughing, I snapped. I was so done. I was seeing red, and I knew I had to teach that girl a lesson. I waited until the gym period was over. Viola was always one of the first to hit the showers, which gave me maybe 10 minutes. I slipped into the locker room, found her locker, and spotted her shampoo bottle in the wire basket. I grabbed it and poured the entire bottle of bleach I'd swiped from the chem lab right inside. By 5th period, Viola was in the nurse's office. By 6th, she was getting loaded into an ambulance. She had a seriously severe burn all over her body. The ER claimed her condition was critical. Within an hour, the security team pulled the locker room footage. The secretary called me out of AP English before the final bell, and I was immediately detained. The news broke a commotion amongst the students. By the time we made it to the main exit, the crowd was ready to swallow us. Every phone was up. Every moment of my head was being filmed. I could see people putting in captions and posting. The police car was at the curb alongside my parents'. The officer opened the rear door and guided me in, and before it closed, I got one last look at the crowd. There wasn't a single face turned away. Every eye at Hargrove High was on me. My name was already trending on 3 different apps before I'd even reached the station. The wish worked out perfectly. I just forgot there's more than one way to be the most talked about girl in school, and I'd gone and picked the worst one. I saw the BBL ad at 2 in the morning. My wedding was only 3 months away, and honestly, the thought of having a perfect, round, bouncy butt instead of my flat one for the wedding and honeymoon pictures was way too tempting to pass up. My fiancé Maxwell had brought it up once as a joke. He was out of town on a business trip and wouldn't be back for another 2 weeks. I figured I'd surprise him. I clicked the link to get more details and found it was a limited-time deal, promising a certified surgeon and real results. The before and after pics looked legit. The video testimonials were great too. Those women sounded totally natural and spoke specifically not like they were reading off a script. The comments section was blowing up with people tagging their friends. I saved the thing, told myself I'd really check it out in the morning. 3 days later, I went ahead and booked a consultation. The building was on a street I knew, which was a plus. The lobby was clean. There was a directory on the wall, and the elevator took me up to a standard hallway. The office itself wasn't fancy or anything, but it was neat and organized. The doctor who saw me was super chill and took his time. He walked me through the whole fat transfer process, how long recovery would take, the compression stuff I'd need, and what the results would realistically look like at different points. He took notes and asked about my medical history. When I asked about the price, he immediately explained that some brand was covering the difference. Near the end of the consultation, he brought up a cancellation. One of our other clients suddenly came down with a fever. Her afternoon slot is open, and we've already got everything prepped and the anesthesiologist is here. If you want to jump on it right now, we can give you a better deal. The digit he quoted was pretty tempting, but I was still on the fence. He must have noticed my hesitation because he quickly added that he totally got it if I needed more time, but the number he threw out for a same-day spot was so low that I ended up agreeing. He gave me something to chill out before the procedure and told me to hop on the table. I remember staring at the ceiling, thinking about texting Lucy, my sister, before I totally pass out. When I woke up, I had no clue what time it was. Something felt off about the room, even before I was totally awake. It was pitch dark and quiet, with no beeps or machine sounds. I was cladded in a thin blanket on a bed with a metal frame, and a door looked bolted. To my left hung equipment that had no business being there in a butt-lifting surgery. I tried searching for my phone in my pocket, but couldn't find it. I somehow pushed myself up onto one elbow, wanting to call out to someone. Suddenly, my eyes landed on the shelves in the corner, lined with glass jars filled with a dark liquid. Something was floating inside. I squinted and gasped. Tens of human organs were harvested there. I could see kidney, a liver section, and other things I didn't have words for. All of them were labeled in marker on pieces of white tape. The room tilted. I grabbed the bed frame and held on. This was not a cosmetic surgery unit. These guys were harvesting organs and selling them, and I had walked in through the front door, signed a consent form, and let one of them put a needle in my arm. My heart started pounding, and my head buzzed. I could hear faint voices in the hallway. In a few minutes, they'd be here. I got to my feet. My legs were unsteady and the room swam, but I made myself stand. I looked at the door, the shelves, and the jars. I searched for anything I could use. There was a metal tray on the table beside the bed with instruments laid out on it. I grabbed a scissor and hid it behind my back, right as the door opened. "Good, you're up. We'll get started here in a second." The doctor came in with that same friendly look he had during the consultation. He saw I was awake, but didn't seem bothered at all.
Get away!
He rolled his eyes and started filling up a syringe. It'll be real quick, I promise. He whistled as he started coming closer. I backed away, gripping the scissors hard. Just as he caught my wrist, I stabbed the scissors into his shoulder and charged at the door before he could get his footing back. He screamed and tried grabbing my arm, but I twisted hard until his grip slipped and got through the gap into the hallway. I could hear footsteps coming from everywhere. There were more of them. The hallway felt never-ending, and it was badly lit. Closed doors kept running down both sides. From behind one of them, I could hear faint knocking, like whoever was doing it had been at it for a long time. I wanted to stop and to be clear about that, but I couldn't. He was already in the hallway behind me. I ran all the way to the far end, through a fire door, into a stairwell, and out onto the street. I sat down on the pavement because my legs stopped working. A few passers-by stopped and called emergency services. They stayed with me until the cops arrived. The police got there fast. Someone had already called in a tip about the building. They'd seen the same ad, done some digging, and flagged it before I ever walked through the doors. Officers were already on their way when I came out. They found 4 other women inside. I was the only one who got out on her own. I think about that more than anything else. I know there was nothing I could have done in that hallway with them chasing me, but it doesn't stop the overthinking. The case is ongoing. I've been told not to discuss details publicly. I'll still warn the others to keep them from making the same mistakes I did, though. Don't trust everything you see on the internet, especially the offers that seem too good to be true, because all it takes is one mistake to cost you your peace of mind, sanity, and sometimes organs, or even life. For most of my adult life, I worked insurance claims out of a beige cubicle on the 3rd floor of the Liberty Mutual Regional Office in Scranton, pushing paperwork for people I'd never actually met. The job was every bit as soul-crushing as it sounds. The Appalachian Trails were always my way of hitting the reset button. It wasn't really a hobby or a fitness thing. It was just the only reliable way I'd found to quiet my mind after stepping out of college and joining the corporate herd. About 3 years ago, I found a trail deep in the mountains of West Virginia that I'd never even heard of before. I stumbled across it on a hiking forum where some guy described it as barely maintained and worth every step. He didn't post any pictures, but the comments were full of people talking about how isolated and middle of nowhere the place felt. I had to check it out. So the minute I got a 3-day weekend, I packed my gear, said goodbye to my girlfriend, and drove straight there. At first glance, the trail looked like any other standard dirt path cutting through the woods, but maybe an hour in, I stepped into a clearing that stopped me dead in my tracks. A campsite had been completely destroyed. 2 tents were ripped open, as if someone had shredded paper bags, the fabric hanging in long strips. Sleeping bags were dragged through the mud and tossed everywhere. Somebody had even dismantled the fire pit entirely, kicking burning charcoal across the clearing and leaving black scorch marks spiderwebbed through the dirt. Near one of the tents, a massive duck lay in the mud with its head chopped off. Its blood had sprayed across the canvas in a wide arc. My mouth went dry. I stood there for a full minute, trying to make sense of the scene. Gotta be a bear attack, I muttered to myself. The campers probably packed and bolted, leaving all their gear behind. I kept repeating that explanation in my head until I finally calmed down enough to keep moving. The place felt deeply wrong, but strangely enough, it shut off all the noise in my head. The sun had already started turning a deep orange, and I knew I only had about an hour and a half before darkness completely swallowed the trail. Then, I saw it. A soft yellow glow hanging maybe 30 feet off the path between the trees. It wasn't moving around like a flashlight. It stayed perfectly still. At first, I figured somebody had hung a lantern from a branch. Maybe it belonged to the people from the wrecked campsite, or maybe it was some kind of trail marker left by a ranger. My brain kept feeding me excuses like that while I stepped off the path and walked toward it. As I got closer, the birds suddenly exploded from the trees all at once, shrieking and scattering into the sky like something had startled them. I stopped and scanned the tree line, but I couldn't see anything moving, so I kept going. About 5 minutes later, I heard rustling in the leaves to my left, perfectly matching the pace of my footsteps. I slowed down. The sound slowed down too. I tried convincing myself it was just a deer, but my skin prickled and my heartbeat sped up. Finally, I stepped beneath the light and looked up at the source. It was a small incandescent bulb wired to a car battery sitting at the base of the tree, swaying slightly in the breeze. Around me, the entire forest had gone silent. Then, thunk. Something punched straight through my left arm just below the shoulder. For one confused second, I didn't understand what had happened. Then, the pain hit. An unbearable, blinding ache exploded through my arm, as if someone were trying to tear it off my body. I hit the dirt face first, screaming and writhing in agony. A booming laugh erupted from somewhere above me. I rolled over and looked up. A man sat perched on a thick tree branch, maybe 15 feet overhead. His hair was wild, and his beard hung so low it brushed the bark beneath him. One leg dangled lazily, while a crossbow rested across his knee. He laughed hysterically, slapping his hand against his leg like he'd just heard the funniest joke in the world. The second he started climbing down, I forced myself to my feet and ran. My left arm hung uselessly at my side. The bolt was still lodged inside it, and every movement sent waves of pain through my body. But I ran anyway. Behind me, I could hear him crashing through the woods and laughing the entire time. Another bolt whipped past my head, missing my ear by inches before slamming into a tree trunk ahead of me. I sprinted harder, blindly crashing through the darkness. Branches whipped across my face, roots snagged my boots and nearly sent me sprawling. I could barely see where I was stepping, but he was close. I could feel him behind me. My lungs burned. Then, suddenly, the trees thinned out beneath my feet, and I felt gravel instead of dirt. A pickup truck was coming down the road. I practically threw myself into the headlights, waving my good arm like a lunatic until the truck finally screeched to a stop. The farmer behind the wheel saw the state of my arm and drove me straight to the county hospital. He even let me use his phone to call 911 on the way there. Doctors had to remove the bolt during surgery. Now I've got 2 small scars on the front and back of my left shoulder as permanent souvenirs for being reckless and stupid. The police searched the section of the trail later. They found the destroyed campsite, the car battery, and the hanging light bulb. But the man and his crossbow were long gone. I haven't set foot in West Virginia since then, and I definitely don't hike alone anymore. Some nights, sitting beneath those buzzing office lights in my cubicle, I catch myself thinking maybe this kind of life isn't actually so bad after all. But mostly, I think about that yellow light swaying between the trees, how warm and inviting it looked, and how obvious a trap it should have been. I studied photography at Columbia College, Chicago back in my early 20s. Once I graduated, I spent a few years shooting commercial work for small travel and regional magazines across the Midwest, until an editor sent me to photograph an abandoned tuberculosis hospital outside Louisville for a Halloween issue. I still remember those trashed hallways, the paint peeling off the walls, and the old patient files scattered all over the place. That shoot basically flipped my whole world upside down. 8 years later, abandoned places had become my entire career. Black Hollow first came to me through Curtis Hale. He was an indie horror director I'd worked with a couple of years earlier down in rural Kentucky. We were shooting the ruins of an old coal camp outside Harlan for a low-budget movie he was trying to finance when he brought it up.
It's an old mining town way deep in the West Virginia woods, where everyone disappeared overnight in the late 60s.
What do you mean disappeared?
No clue, man, but people in Kellington won't go anywhere near it. Some say there are weird lights hovering over the valley for weeks before it happened.
I googled it right after we finished talking. It was easy to find tons of creepy local stories buried in online forums where conspiracy theories and other BS usually floated around. None of it came from official sources, but the legends were so disturbing and intriguing that I couldn't stop scrolling. They all claimed the entire town vanished back in the 60s, and that people still refused to go anywhere near the place, saying the fog carried voices that weren't human. The deeper I went, the more obsessed I became, and before I knew it, I was headed out there on the first free weekend I had. I rolled into Kellerton at around noon and stopped at a local diner to ask about Black Hollow. The woman behind the counter stared at me for a long moment before finally replying.
You shouldn't go there. They don't like intruders.
I tried to get her to explain, but she completely brushed me off and went right back to cleaning the counter without another word. I figured it was probably just another small-town legend, so I decided to find the place myself. I found the access road about 4 miles past the edge of town. From there, I had to hike the last 2 miles. The village completely snuck up on me. It looked exactly like the stories described. Rusted bikes were still propped against porch railings. I peeked through a broken window and saw a kitchen table where plates and cups still sat coated in decades of dust, as if someone had vanished mid-meal. There were even children's shoes sunk into the mud beside a doorway and a faded red sign above the general store that read Hollow Provisions. I spent about 2 hours shooting while there was still decent light. The church in the middle of town was definitely the highlight. It had tall, narrow windows, and the pews were still lined up perfectly. There was even a hymn board on the wall with the numbers still hanging from it. I set up for a long exposure inside and kept shooting. But the second the sun disappeared behind the trees, a thick fog started rolling through town, weaving between the buildings. The temperature suddenly dropped several degrees, and the wind carried this strange buzzing hum. I only wanted a couple more dusk shots, so I kept going. I was framing a shot through the church doorway when I noticed a figure standing in the mist between 2 buildings across the street. It was tall, with arms that looked far too long. I tried convincing myself it was just a telephone pole or maybe a tree branch. I looked down for a split second to double-check my camera settings, but when I looked back up, it had moved closer. My throat went bone dry, and my heart started hammering. I zoomed in slightly and realized there were actually 3 of them. They moved slightly, without even disturbing the fog around them. I snapped a photo out of pure instinct, and when the flash hit their faces, the light bounced back like it had struck glass. I kept mashing the shutter button without thinking. My brain still hadn't caught up with what I was seeing, and they kept drifting closer. They were only a few feet away when I finally snapped out of it. I grabbed my gear and bolted before they even reached the church steps. The hike back to my car is still a complete blur. I ended up driving 4 hours straight, without looking back once until I was safely locked inside my apartment in Pittsburgh. A couple days later, I finally developed the rolls in my home darkroom. I've always preferred film for low-light photography anyway. The grain feels more honest somehow. I went through all 4 rolls from that night. Every single frame I took after sunset was blank. The photos showed nothing except empty buildings and deserted streets. But when I held some of the prints close, I could hear faint whispering coming from the paper itself, like the film had captured some frequency that wasn't visible. I even showed the prints to a few other photographers. 2 of them heard it too. One guy dropped the photo onto my light table, grabbed his gear, and walked out without saying a word. He still hasn't returned my calls. I've never gone back to Black Hollow. I've dug through historical archives and newspaper indexes all across West Virginia, going all the way back to the 50s, and I still can't find a single mention of a town by that name. It's like the only place Black Hollow exists is on those strange online forums. On paper, the town never existed at all. But I still keep those prints hanging in my darkroom, and some nights, when the apartment gets quiet enough, I can still hear the whispering coming from the paper. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the knife as I stared, stunned. "Please, Jacob," Nate rasped. His bloody fingers weakly clawed the kitchen tiles, trying to reach me. Just say the words before they get here." The sirens outside were getting louder by the minute, but I was frozen in the middle of my kitchen. The knife in my hand dripped his blood. It splashed everywhere. I opened and closed my mouth, staring at my old high school friend, clutching his wounded gut on the floor. He used the last of his strength to push the little twig toy toward me and begged, "Please, one wish. That's all I ask." 72 hours ago, I didn't even know Nate Calloway was still alive. How I desperately wished I still didn't. I'd known him since Westview High, back when I was 15. We weren't exactly tight friends, but we hung out at after-school parties and played baseball together. Honestly, I always thought he was a total weirdo. After graduation, he dropped out of Columbus State after one semester, and I totally lost track of him. That Saturday evening, I walked into the Fox and Hound for a beer after work and found him sitting at the end of the bar. He waved, I waved back, and 15 minutes later, we were catching up on life. Honestly, it was pretty cool at first, but after the second round, things got weird. "Jacob, I need to show you something." He reached into his jacket and pulled out this small toy in chewing gum-like packaging. Nate said something about making a wish and snapping the thing in half so the wish would be granted. What the hell is this? He said it was the One Wish Willow and that it was real. I started cracking up, but my laughter died when I saw how dead serious he was. "Nate, bro, I need a favor, Jacob. If anything goes down, I need you to snap that and wish that I never get caught." I figured he was wasted, or maybe pranking me, but then he explained why he needed it. 6 days earlier, Nate had walked into the Midwest Federal on Broad Street, handed a note to a teller, and walked out with $63,000 in a duffel bag. He'd been bouncing between motels ever since, totally convinced the cops were on his ass. This twig was his only backup plan. I put my glass down, feeling disgusted forever knowing this man. "You're a federal criminal. Look, you can take a share." "Share? You dumb, all right? I'm gonna pretend I didn't hear any of that." I settled my tab, grabbed my keys, and bailed. By the time I got to my place, Nate was already sitting on my porch. I completely freaked out and livid at the same time. Ignoring him, I walked right past and was about to slam the door, but he shoved his way inside before I could stop him. He started talking a mile a minute, saying the cops had his license plate number and they'd find him any day now. He kept waving that stupid willow stick in my face. "Just say the words, Jacob. 2 seconds. I'm not asking you to do anything else." "Get out of my house, Nate." I shoved him. He stumbled, and before I could even blink, he pulled out the knife. I backed into my bedroom, and he kept coming, shoving that stupid willow stick in my face, until I finally cornered me in the kitchen. "I'm already wanted for 1 crime, Jacob. 2 won't make a damn difference. Do it." Suddenly, a siren started wailing way off in the distance. Nate got distracted for a second, and I lunged for the knife. He tried shaking me off, and we both crashed hard into a chair, taking it down with us. I barely had a second to breathe before he was on top of me. I grabbed his wrist and tried to pry his grip open, but he was stronger than I expected. His arm bent inward, and the blade was only inches from my chest. I panicked and yanked his hand as hard as I could. The knife clattered onto the tile right next to my head. Before he could lunge for it, I snatched it up and jammed it into his gut. He gasped, rolled over, and collapsed, clutching his wound. His blood was everywhere, and he was screaming. I was frozen. My heart was pounding. The sirens cut out right near my place. I could hear them more clearly now. "Please, Jacob," Nate sobbed, grabbing my leg. When I still refused, he used his last bit of adrenaline and lunged. Grabbing the knife off, he pointed it right at me. "Do it, now, or I swear to God." I was completely panicked, but the cops were closer. I hurriedly scooped up that stupid twig off the tile and said, "I wish Nate never gets caught." I snapped the thing in half. Nate's eyes went wide. He looked relieved. Ignoring him, I lurched toward the hallway to get to the cops. He tried cutting me off from the front door. I shoved him away hard. He stumbled backward and caught the edge of the counter with the back of his head and went down. He didn't get back up. The police came through the front door 2 minutes later. They found Nate on the floor and a duffel bag in his car with banded bills, and me standing in the kitchen with a broken twig in my fist and blood on my hands. It took me a while to piece together what had actually happened. Nate never got caught because he was already dead before they walked through that door. The wish was granted exactly as he'd asked for it. The DA cleared me 6 weeks later, after I told them it was self-defense. The bar footage helped, as did the reports that confirmed my injuries matched those of someone who hadn't started the fight. I still have the 2 halves of the willow in a Ziploc bag in my kitchen drawer, right next to where Nate fell. I keep telling myself I'm going to throw them out. I just couldn't bring myself to touch them. The taste of his blood on my tongue was repulsive, and the screams that erupted around me after it happened felt like they were going to burst my eardrums. As I sat there, drenched in blood and chunks of human flesh, I broke down crying as I wondered how I ended up here. To understand why I found myself in this position, I'll need to take you back to this morning. It started out like every other Thursday. I woke up, went to the gym, and then got ready for work. However, when I was about to leave the house, I got a call from my childhood friend, Trey Coleman. "Hey, Lisa, I'm gonna be back in town soon. We should hang out, just like the old times."
Sure, Trey. I'm going to be free after work. Where do you want to go?
I was thinking we could just walk around town and revisit the old spots we used to visit when we were kids.
That sounds great, Trey. We can meet at our old college bar after work.
Trey was one of my best friends in the whole world. Our parents were close friends, and even though we weren't related, we'd basically grown up together like siblings. He'd left home after college, as he said he wanted to leave our small town and travel the world. We'd managed to keep in touch over the years, and I was happy that he was visiting. After I was done with work, I changed into something more comfortable before making my way to the bar. After we met up at the bar, we ordered some drinks and caught up with each other. Trey couldn't hold his alcohol well, and it wasn't long before he was drunk. After a couple more drinks, Trey got up from his seat and said, "Remember that old amusement park you were always terrified of when we were kids? How about we go back and reminisce?"
The Silver Lake Amusement Park? Why would you want to go to that old dump? There are much better places in town.
I know there are, but come on, Lisa. Can't we just do it for old time's sake?
I don't think alcohol and roller coasters go well together. Maybe we should just go home.
Trey didn't want to take no for an answer, and he kept persisting until I finally agreed. I wasn't too keen on going to our local amusement park, and I hadn't been there in years for good reason. The Silver Lake Park was an old family-owned rundown amusement park that had been in our town since the early 90s. The local underfunded park had been poorly maintained, and it was filled with aging equipment and negligent operators who didn't really care about their jobs, but it had somehow stayed operational over the years. The last time we visited the park as kids wasn't a particularly good memory for me. I told Trey that I was scared of the roller coasters, and I didn't want to go on any of the rides. However, Trey, who had always been a daredevil and adrenaline junkie, convinced me to go on one of the rides, and I ended up crying after we were strapped in. He would always tease me about this throughout our long friendship, and I wasn't really surprised when he said we should go on that same ride I was terrified of when we were kids. Even though I was much older now, I was still incredibly anxious and a little scared after they'd strapped us into the very first seats. I began to wonder if the roller coaster's rusty old lap bar would hold, and my heart began to race in my chest, so I closed my eyes. Trey, who could see I was scared, held my hand and said, "There's nothing to be afraid of, Lisa. You have to open your eyes and face your fears. Remember, you only live once, and life is too short to be scared of silly roller coasters." I slowly opened my eyes, but I was still a little anxious, and Trey, the daredevil, decided to take things up a notch, saying, "I'll prove there's nothing to be afraid of. You just have to trust me, Lisa." It was at this point that Trey began fiddling with the old lap bar, and he somehow managed to take off the rusty latch and stand up. The roller coaster hadn't picked up enough speed yet, but my anxiety shot through the roof as I begged him to sit down. Trey didn't listen, as he was drunk and he started to scream, "I'm the king of the world!" The ride was picking up speed now, and I urged him to sit back down as I tried to reach out for him. However, Trey didn't let me help him, and he started laughing maniacally. It all happened within a few seconds as the roller coaster suddenly took a sharp turn, and before Trey could sit back down, he was unfortunately thrust into a low overhead beam. The metal beam snapped him in two, as his torso was split open and his body was bent graphically backward. His blood and pieces of flesh spattered all over my face, and everyone else on the roller coaster began to scream. The ride was quickly brought to a halt, and the paramedics were called. There was nothing they could do at that point, as they gathered what remained of Trey's mangled corpse. To make matters even worse, the authorities were called, and some of the witnesses on the roller coaster who had seen me reaching out to Trey had told the officers that I might have pushed him. I was kept at the station, but luckily, after giving my statement, a toxicology report confirmed that Trey was intoxicated, and I was cleared of any suspicions. After Trey's funeral, I blamed myself for what happened. Even though I didn't push him, I could have stopped him from going on that roller coaster while under the influence. I kept thinking back to that night, as I told myself I should have insisted more on going back home. And I couldn't even look his grieving mother in the eyes when she gave me a hug at the end of the funeral. Even with all the time that has passed, the traumatic incident made me swear to never step within a 50-mile radius of any amusement park. I matched with Connor on Tinder. He was 30-ish, sold car parts for a living, and played violin when he wasn't working. Our chats were decent, so when he asked to meet up in person, I didn't hesitate. We decided to meet downtown at this popular Italian restaurant. He was already sitting when I got there, but the moment he saw me, his face changed color.
"Damn, you're flat as a surfboard!"
He yelled it loud enough for heads to turn. He got up, saying he had shown up hoping for a woman and had gotten a plank of wood instead. A group of teen girls giggled across our table. I flushed and tried standing my ground, but Connor grabbed his wine glass, dumped it onto my face, and stormed out. I ran home crying, losing my mind over the embarrassment. By morning, I promised myself I'd fix my butt no matter what. I couldn't afford a lifting surgery. I was fresh out of uni and barely made enough to stay afloat, but I looked anyway. I checked out financing options, clinics in other states, and those medical tourism packages, but all of it was way out of my league. With each passing day, I was going crazy desperate. I hated looking at myself in the mirror. A few weeks later, I was scrolling through my Instagram when a sponsored ad popped up in my feed. It had one of those before and after snaps that looked legit. The caption mentioned making good care available to everyone. The doctor's name wasn't anywhere on the page, but it mentioned their number. I dialed it and a guy answered. He said he was Dr. Joseph, and he was a registered cosmetic surgeon. He asked me a few questions and quoted a surprisingly low price for my case. He said he ran a private practice from his home and could see me this coming Thursday. The house was on the city's outskirts, on a long block with wide gaps between properties. I sat in the driveway a few minutes before entering. A man who appeared to be in his mid-40s opened the door, donning a medical coat over his regular overalls. His glasses were thick, and his hair was wild and curly. He introduced himself as Dr. Joseph and led me to his consultation room. It was only a plain room with a desk and a couple of chairs. He started asking basic questions about my history and what I was looking to get. I told him everything I thought was necessary.
You'll be the belle of the ball after this, Julia.
He smiled, showing off his uneven yellow teeth. His breath smelled like old garbage and gross spit. The smell was everywhere. I turned my head away so I won't actually throw up. Suddenly, my eyes landed on a few faint red spots on the carpet near the door. I started getting a bad feeling. I looked him up and down. His coat, which I thought looked clean when he opened the door, had brownish dried up stains too. I gulped. My heart started beating wildly in my chest. I told him I needed to use the bathroom. He pointed me down the hallway. I walked slowly, trying to observe the layout. Once I hit the bathroom, I splashed some cold water on my wrists and told myself I was freaking out over nothing. People hold practices in their houses. The weird smell was probably the building itself. Suddenly, a heavy thud echoed from down the hallway. Right after, the rooting smell got so hard it made my eyes water and the back of my throat burn. I opened the door and headed straight for the front door, but Joseph was already in the hallway, holding a clipboard.
Just a consent form before we continue.
He grinned.
What was that sound?
I whispered, backing away. A cold dread seized me.
Oh, that was just the material for your butt, Julia.
He shrugged.
Don't worry, it's fresh.
Material?
Yeah, freshly dug. Tony was buried just 2 days ago. We'll just sever the torso and stitch what's left of him to you. It'll be a perfect fit.
My stomach dropped. I bolted down the hallway, the only other direction available, thinking there had to be a back door or a window. But he was faster. He caught my arm before I made it 3 steps and spun me hard into the wall. My shoulder took the impact, and I bit through the inside of my cheek.
I've been waiting a long time for someone patient enough to stay.
He snickered, fisting my hair and slamming it against the wall. My head spun, and blood oozed from the side of my head. I screamed and struggled, but he was too strong. He started dragging me by the hair towards the consultation room. I could see the gray toe tips of Tony. I had to do something quick. I reached for his hair and tugged the hardest I could before I drove my knee into his groin. Joseph doubled forward. I shoved him sideways into the wall and ran out of the house. I could hear him behind me. He was trying to get closer. I grabbed a vase from the hallway and swung it backward without turning around. I felt it connect, and he went down hard, but I didn't look. I dashed out of the front door, got to my car, and drove to the nearest police station. My hands were shaking so badly I had to pull over twice before I reached the main road. I got Joseph on the floor, passed out. He confessed to snatching bodies for the cemetery and doing fake surgeries. He wasn't any kind of plastic surgeon. He was just some dude who always wanted to be a doctor but never made it happen. All the victims they found had answered that same ad. They were all young women who wanted to look pretty after being humiliated. They said I was lucky I survived. I know that, and I'm grateful. It doesn't stop me from worrying about those who weren't or wouldn't, because there are still tons of Julia scrolling through their feeds, looking for a cheap way to stop feeling like a flat board, and they are desperate enough to try by any means. My buddy Mark and I had been planning the World Cup trip for months. We weren't exactly die-hard soccer fans, but any excuse to get out of town and sit in a packed stadium felt like reason enough to book the tickets. We got there early, found our seats, and settled in. The energy was insane. Tens of thousands of people were crammed into one space, all buzzing off the same thing. By kickoff, I was already on my third beer and feeling pretty great about the whole decision, when my eyes fell on this guy sitting about 6 rows ahead of us and a few seats to the left. I noticed him only because he was the only person in that entire section not watching the game. While everyone else was angled toward the pitch and reacting to the ball, he was turned completely around in his seat, facing back into the crowd and eyeing me up. At first, I brushed it off, figuring he might be looking for somebody, but he didn't look like he was scanning around. He was still as a statue, staring directly at me without any of the restless shifting a person does when they're searching for a friend. I looked away and told myself I was imagining it. A few minutes passed. When I looked back, he was still staring. We locked eyes and he grinned at me, sticking his tongue out. It was enough to make my skin crawl. Giggling at my scrunched up nose, he opened his mouth even wider, and I felt my stomach drop. The guy didn't have a single tooth. His gums were bare and smooth, like he'd never had any teeth to begin with. His lips were stretched into this massive, creepy grin that looked completely wrong, and his tongue was crazy long, hanging way past his chin and brushing against his jawline. He locked eyes with me again, gave a little head tilt, and started moving that insane tongue, doing this weird panting thing like a dog in the summer heat. I grabbed Mark's arm and pointed. "Dude, look, there's this weirdo guy 6 rows down." Mark took a quick peek, maybe 3 seconds, and shrugged. "Nah, I don't see anything strange." He turned back to the game. I told him to look again, specifically at the guy who wasn't watching the match and was turned around in his seat. Mark looked again, shrugged, and said there were like 40,000 people here and half of them probably weren't watching the game either. The stadium erupted as the team scored and the whole place went nuts. Banners went up, confetti flew, and everyone was screaming and cheering. I tried to find the weirdo through the mess of high fives and hugs, but couldn't see him. Eventually, I figured I was just psyching myself out and decided to enjoy the moment with everyone else. When the noise settled and everyone sat back down, the man was closer. He jumped 4 rows and was sitting in a spot he definitely had not been in before. My hand tightened on my cup. As time progressed, it kept happening. Every goal scare, every eruption where the crowd pulled my attention to the pitch for 3 seconds, he moved. By halftime, he was close enough that I could see him clearly. The tongue was still out and moving. His eyes hadn't blinked once in the entire time I'd been watching him. He was surrounded by normal people eating nachos and checking their phones, and not a single one of them reacted to him. I leaned over and asked the guy sitting next to him if he knew him. He looked at me, glanced at the seat beside him, and asked if I was high or something. I was losing my mind. When the second half started, he was 3 seats over, right in my row. My heart started hammering, and I was barely breathing. I could actually hear his soft, steady panting, like someone breathing heavily in a closet. I practically clawed at Mark's arm and kept saying his name until he finally turned. "What the fuck, dude? There's this really weird guy 3 seats over." "The seats are empty. There's no one there, Jason." But he was. The man leaned forward and shot that tongue out, making it even longer than I'd seen yet. He let out this little awful giggle at me freaking out and whistled. He then proceeded to swing his tongue around like a snake. It curled up slowly, wrapping around his cheek, sliding right up towards his eye, then pulling back and doing the whole gross thing over and over. I was horrified. Suddenly, both ends of his tongue shot out at the same time and started coiling up over his face. It looked like it was tightening, and he was choking. I closed my eyes and started screaming my head off. I only knew I was doing it because Mark was suddenly shaking me by the shoulders, and the whole section went dead quiet. Someone nearby even shouted to ask if I was having a seizure. "Jason, what's wrong? What's wrong?" Mark was shaking me. I opened my eyes and pointed at the seat, but it was empty. My mouth dried up. We sat there for the rest of the second half, and I couldn't tell you a single thing that happened in the match. I was watching that seat. The people around it went back to the game like nothing had happened, like they'd been doing the entire time. Mark didn't say much on the way back to the hotel. I could tell he didn't know whether to be worried or chalk it up to too much beer. Later, I checked the seating chart for that section. The seat he ended up in showed up as unsold in the game records. Seriously, no one was supposed to be sitting there. I've told this story a bunch since then. I can always see the moment on people's faces when they decide I must have imagined the whole thing. Maybe I did, but I honestly don't know what's scarier. A guy with no teeth and that crazy tongue showing up in a packed stadium where only I could see him? Or the thought that whatever that thing was, it was sitting 3 seats away, and I was the only one it was focused on. I've been obsessed with UFOs since I was about 12, basically right after I saw Star Wars for the first time. My parents thought it was just some phase when I told them I was going to become an astronaut and meet aliens someday, but the more I read, the more hooked I became. Throughout most of my early teens, I stayed up until 2 in the morning, reading declassified UFO documents released by the United States Department of Defense, and digging through stories surrounding the mysterious Phoenix Lights. By the time I turned 16, it had stopped feeling like a childhood obsession and started feeling like the only thing I genuinely cared about. While most kids at school were focused on sports, dating, or figuring out which colleges they wanted to apply to, I spent my weekends digging through astronomy forums, government archives, and old witness interviews buried deep online. The summer I turned 17, my parents moved us to rural Nevada, about 40 minutes east of nowhere. My dad had landed a promotion and was put in charge of a water utility project. The nearest town was tiny, with 1 gas station and a diner that closed at 7 every night. It was a rough transition for a kid whose only close friends still lived back in Reno. The only thing that kept me from losing my mind was the sky. Without all the city light pollution, the stars looked unreal. The moon felt so huge and bright that it almost seemed close enough to touch. I spent night after night sitting on the back porch with my dad's binoculars, but for the longest time, I never saw anything I couldn't explain. Until I did. It was a humid Wednesday night in late July. My parents were dead asleep, but I was still awake, scrolling through a thread about the Phoenix Lights while half watching a breakdown video. The guy in the video was explaining how witnesses described the craft as completely silent, and I remember thinking about how that detail never got enough attention. An object that massive moving that fast without making any sound was honestly the strangest part of the whole incident. Then, suddenly, a blinding white light flooded through my curtains. At first, I figured it was just headlights from a passing car. Usually, the light would sweep across the wall and disappear a second later, but this light stayed perfectly still. It poured through the curtains and filled my entire room. I crawled out of bed and carefully peeked outside. Across the road, 3 silhouettes stood motionless in the field. They were tall, dark, and unnaturally still. Hovering about 30 feet behind them was a glowing oval-shaped object suspended in the air. The light coming off it was so intense that the air around it shimmered like heat waves rising off asphalt. My hands started shaking. I looked around to see if anyone else outside witnessed this, but there was nobody. The silence was so complete, it felt unnatural. Then, all 3 figures slowly turned toward my window. The second they looked at me, I felt a strange buzzing sensation in the back of my skull. Every electronic device in my room died at once. My laptop screen went black. My phone shut off. Hell, even the digital clock beside my bed froze on the exact same time. The room became completely silent, except for the sound of my breathing. A wave of nausea rolled through me. Breathing suddenly felt difficult. The room started spinning. Then, everything went black. I woke up the next morning fully dressed on top of my covers, with sunlight pouring through the window. My laptop was closed on my desk. My phone sat beside the bed at 11% battery, and a dull headache throbbed behind my eyes. I immediately ran to my parents and told them everything.
Sweetie, you probably fell asleep watching videos and had a crazy nightmare.
No, I swear I saw it. It was right there. I kept insisting, but I could tell they didn't believe me. Still, my dad walked out to check the field later that morning. There was nothing there. See? Nothing happened, Evan. For a while, I almost convinced myself he was right. For the next 2 days, I stuck to that explanation. Maybe it really had been some vivid dream caused by obsessing over UFO stuff. That happens, right? Then, on the third morning, I was taking a shower when I felt something behind my left ear. I rushed to the mirror. There was a tiny triangular scar I had never seen before, but it wasn't raw or painful. It had already healed completely, like it had been there for years. Over the next few weeks, I took dozens of pictures of it and dove back into every government document and witness report I could find. 6 weeks later, a new batch of files was released through a FOIA request. Buried deep in the appendix of one report was a list of reoccurring physical markings documented across multiple unidentified aerial phenomenon cases. Most of them were triangular scars, usually behind the ear, sometimes at the base of the neck, and every single one was described as already healed by the time it was discovered. The report listed 41 cases. I'm number 42. I still have the scar, and I still have the files. My parents still think it was just a bad dream. I don't even try convincing them anymore. Honestly, I'm not sure which truth is scarier. There used to be a local amusement park called Davy's Wonder World, located on the outskirts of the little town where I grew up in rural Arkansas. My family and I used to visit the park all the time when I was little, and it quickly became one of my favorite places in the world. However, that all changed on July 19th, 2008, after I was almost brutally murdered at Davy's Wonder World, and my life has never been the same since. It all started one summer evening. My little brother Steven had just turned 13, and he wanted to celebrate his birthday at the amusement park. So we all went to Davy's Wonder World. After we'd arrived, we took a few family pictures and got some snacks before going on Steven's favorite rides at the park. A couple of hours passed before our parents told me it was time to go home, but I'd lost track of Steven, so I went to find him. It took me a few minutes, but when I finally found my brother, he was standing with a boy I'd never seen before, and they were both holding bright blue cotton candy. Steven then introduced me to his new friend Joey, who was a kind-looking kid with dark hair and brown eyes. He told me that they'd met at one of the park's food stands, and Joey had shown him where to get the best cotton candy in the whole amusement park. They both insisted that I should try it before we left, so I agreed. The cotton candy stand was called Billy's world-famous cotton candy, and it was a small, isolated stall sitting on the edge of the amusement park. There were about 10 kids at the cotton candy concession stand, and they were all munching down on the cotton candy like it was the best thing in the whole world. Steven and Joey told me to get the blue raspberry flavor, which was the best seller, but there was something about the stall that felt off-putting. It was hard to explain, but I had this gut feeling that something was wrong, and it only got worse after I met the stand's owner, Billy. Billy was a strange-looking man with bloodshot eyes and a crooked nose. He also had this sick grin on his face as he looked at me and said, "Hey there, little miss. Would you like to try Billy's cotton candy? It's only $3, and it's the best cotton candy in the whole world." Everything about Billy felt wrong, and I was hesitant to buy anything from him, so I declined. Despite my refusal, Billy insisted that I try the blue raspberry cotton candy, and he even offered me a free sample. I was terrified now, and I told Steven and Joey that we should leave. But it was at this point that my little brother suddenly started foaming at the mouth as he fell to the floor. It wasn't long before all the kids around me began to pass out, and before I could even scream, a damp cloth was forced onto my nose. I tried to fight, but the world around me slowly went dark. I woke up in what seemed to be a cramped metal cage, and my eyes felt heavy. 1,000 thoughts ran through my mind as I hoped Steven and his friend Joey were safe. I then frantically looked for any opportunity to escape, and I eventually came across a small metal rod. It was rusty, but I knew I could hit it against the cage's lock and get it open. However, before I could do anything, I froze, as that was the moment I finally saw it. There are no words to explain the horror I felt as I witnessed the morbid sight in front of me. My little brother Steven was lying motionless on a bloody slab. His corpse had been torn open, and Billy was looming over him. I watched in horror as he mutilated his corpse by carefully taking out my little brother's organs before placing them in a cooler. I let out a guttural scream as tears filled my eyes. Billy opened the cage and attempted to sedate me again, but I didn't let him as I pierced the metal rod into his right eye. I immediately bolted toward the door with no hesitation as Billy fell to the floor holding his eye. As I ran for the exit, I could hear him screaming the words,
I'll get you for this, you stupid brat! I swear I'll find you and I'll cut you open!
I ran as fast as my legs could carry me, and I didn't stop until I saw an old couple passing by who immediately helped me call the police. But unfortunately, it was already too late by then, as Billy had escaped before the authorities arrived. An investigation was immediately carried out, and the detectives believed Billy was part of a disturbing organ trafficking ring that they'd been investigating. They uncovered several bodies from the old wooden shed where Billy carried out his operations. All the mutilated corpses, including Steven's, were missing their kidneys, skin tissue, and portions of their livers. The detectives also found surgical tools, copious amounts of ice, in addition to organ preservation fluids like Belzer UW, SPS1, and HTK in the shed. I grieved for my little brother Steven, and I couldn't imagine the terror he and his innocent friend Joey must have felt in their last moments. However, as the investigation continued, things took an even more disturbing turn when the detectives couldn't find anyone matching Joey's description among the corpses. While they weren't certain, a few detectives believed that Joey was actually part of the organ trafficking ring, as these organizations often hired young boys to lure other unsuspecting kids around their age for organ harvesting. Despite the authorities' best efforts, they were unable to find Billy or Joey, and they are still out there, somewhere, to this very day. I grew up in a regular house in Wisconsin. My dad, Gerald, was a city worker who coached my soccer team, and my mom, Helen, was the heart of the neighborhood with her Sunday dinners. Life was easy until I turned 12, came home from school one day, and found my driveway full of cops and ambulances. Someone had crashed a car in our living room, and my mom was gone before the EMTs even got there. After that, our family totally fell apart. Dad stopped coaching, cooking, and basically being a dad. I kept waiting for him to snap out of it, but he never did. By college, we were literally strangers who had these awkward 10-minute birthday calls that left me feeling like a dumpster, until eventually, I had to stop calling. So, when Father's Day hit last June, I was again going to be a no-show. But my best friend insisted that since I was right there in Milwaukee for my summer internship, I should go. She said I'd regret it if I didn't even try. I agreed and drove over that Saturday with a card and some cheap whiskey. It was his favorite. Outside the house, everything was pretty much the same. The driveway still had cracks, the lawn looked like a jungle, and the porch had overgrown weeds. My dad welcomed me, wearing the same old flannel he'd had for decades.
Happy Father's Day, Dad.
I beamed and hugged him. We spent the day cooking spaghetti and talking about Mom for hours. It was still painful, but by the time we headed into the living room, I was really glad I'd actually shown up. Suddenly, my eyes fell on the basement door, and I noticed the huge-ass padlock on it. I finally moved all her stuff down to the basement. It's pretty packed in there, so just stay away from it, kiddo. Okay? He said. I nodded, feeling happy that he was finally moving on. We kept chatting about my college and stuff, but I noticed his eyes kept darting back to the basement door. He looked a shade paler and totally jumpy. Around 8:30, the power cut out completely. Dad pushed back from the table, annoyed, before he headed down the hallway to check the breaker. It was dead silent for a minute or two, before this gross, wet coughing sound echoed up from the floorboards, followed by the sound of metal scraping against concrete. My hands started shaking. I looked up at the basement door and felt a pit in my stomach. Dad had been acting weird all day. What in the hell could he be hiding? I pulled out my phone, clicked on the flashlight, and headed toward the back of the laundry room, where we had another door leading to the basement. I cracked it open and shone the light down the stairs and nearly doubled over at the gross odor. It smelled like rust and rot. Covering my nose, I peeked in and caught chains bolted right into the wall at the bottom of the steps. There was a thin mattress on the floor, stacks of canned food, and a bucket in the corner. It looked like someone had been living down there for years. Didn't I tell you to stay away? I froze and turned. Dad was standing right behind me, looking furious and exhausted.
Dad? What's going on?
It's Dennis Carey. I knew the name. Dennis Carey was the drunk who killed Mom and served 7 years for it. I couldn't just let him walk around like nothing happened. So I told him I had work for him. When he showed up,
You kept him down?
Before I could even finish the sentence, a skeletal gray hand shot out from the blackness of the stairwell and clamped around my ankle. I screamed and stumbled, but before he could pull me down, Dad lunged forward and shoved me hard away from the door.
Run, Rebecca! Get out!
He screamed. In the next second, he was yanked off his feet. His chin hit the floorboards with a sickening thud before he was dragged backward, fingernails clawing at the wood, into the dark. Without thinking, I bolted. High-pitched, rasping laughter bubbled up from the basement as I scrambled toward the front door. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely find the deadbolt. Just as I reached for it, a heavy butcher knife whistled past my ear and thunked deep into the doorframe, followed by a glass vase that shattered against the wall right next to my head. I spun around, gasping, and saw Dennis emerging from the hallway with a hammer in one hand. His skin was looking like rotting paper. He was howling my mother's name at the top of his lungs, laughing like a maniac as he shuffled toward me real fast. I screamed and lunged for the main staircase. I could feel him right behind me. I reached my old bedroom, dove inside and slammed the door shut, just as Dennis reached for it. He slammed into the door hard enough to rattle the whole frame. I shoved my desk against it, gasping for air while he laughed and pounded.
Helen! Open the damn door, sweetheart!
Just as the hinges gave way and he barged inside, I shut my eyes and drove the poker forward with both hands. The metal punched deep into his stomach. He let out this awful wet gasp and stumbled backward, staring down at the metal rod sticking out of him. His hammer clattered to the floor, and he folded up. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at him, before the cops finally showed up. A neighbor had called 911 after hearing all the crashing. They found Dad in the basement. He was already gone. After a few hearings, the whole thing was officially ruled self-defense. But even now, I still wake up some nights, hearing Dennis calling Mom's name from somewhere downstairs. And on the worst nights, I see the look on Dad's face right before he shoved me away. Protecting me was probably the first thing he'd truly cared about in years, and it cost him everything. Pelican Plunge Water Park had been on our list all summer before my friends and I finally made it out there. It was one of the best water parks in Tampa, and we couldn't wait to hit the massive high-speed slides, which were basically the main attraction. It was a near vertical drop and pitch black inside.
You can't see anything once you're in the tube. It feels like you're literally falling.
Giggled Sarah, my friend Matthew's girlfriend. So you've been here before? I asked her.
A few times.
She answered, stepping up in the almost empty line. The park wasn't crowded that day. We were pumped. Sarah went first. She was always the brave one, never scared of anything. She climbed to the top and waved down at us before she zipped into the slide. We waited at the bottom, watching the exit and waiting for her to come shooting out. 10 seconds went by, then 20, and 30. She should have been out already. The slide only takes 15 seconds max. But when a whole minute went by and Sarah didn't appear, we started freaking out. Okay, where is she? Matthew panicked. The lifeguard at the bottom radioed up to the top and asked if she'd actually gone down. They confirmed she'd entered the slide, but she never came out. The lifeguard looked confused. Maybe she got stuck, I suggested. They immediately paused the ride, shut down the water flow, and called a maintenance worker. We stood there waiting and getting more nervous by the second. About 10 minutes later, a worker showed up, grabbed a headlamp, and started climbing up the slide from the bottom, going against the flow and crawling through the tube. We kept watching the exit, waiting for him to find her and tell us she was okay, maybe hurt, but alive. He was inside for maybe 5 minutes. When he came down, his face was pale, and he looked shaken. The slide is clear. There's nobody in there. That didn't make sense. We watched her go in. She never came out. So where was she? They checked the cameras and looked at the footage. Sure enough, she went down the slide at the top, but since there was no camera at the exit, no one could actually be sure if she ever came out. The staff searched everywhere, but Sarah had simply vanished. After an hour, they decided to restart the ride and let someone else go through, see if maybe there was a hidden exit or something they were missing. One of the staff members volunteered. He was a young guy who seemed nervous but went anyway and climbed to the top. We watched from below. He entered the slide. We counted. Exactly 15 seconds later, he came shrieking. He hit the pool and immediately scrambled out, gasping and shaking. What happened? I hit something halfway down. Something soft, like flesh. We all froze. They shut down the slide again. This time, they sent 3 workers up with flashlights and searched every inch of the tube. When they got back about 30 minutes later, it was totally empty. No one was in the slide at all. But the guy who went down stood his ground. He definitely hit something and felt the softness of a human body. They called in more workers and searched every inch of the park until dusk fell. They finally found Sarah at the bottom of the pool, still as a corpse. They pulled her out and started CPR, but she was already gone and drowned. The paramedics said she'd been dead for at least an hour, but that was impossible. She'd entered the slide and never came out of the exit. How did she end up in the pool? How did she bypass the entire slide? Nobody could explain it. Matthew was devastated. Sarah's mom couldn't stop crying. We spent the whole night together, talking about all the possibilities. Joey, one of our friends, had recordings of the day on his phone. He pulled out his phone and started going through videos we'd recorded that day, Found one from right before Sarah went down the slide. He'd been filming from the bottom and pointing the camera at the exit and waiting for her to come out. He turned up the volume and really paid attention. At first, it was faint, but it was definitely there. A banging sound, like someone hitting the inside of the slide, muffled and desperate. Suddenly, Sarah's voice called out from inside, screaming for help. He showed us the video. We all listened and watched. You could hear the banging and the voice, but the slide was supposed to be fast. You go in and you come out. There's no time to bang on the walls or scream, unless you get stuck or something stops you. But the workers checked and said the slide was clear. So what stopped her? What kept her in there long enough to bang on the walls and long enough to scream? And how did she end up at the bottom of the pool that wasn't even connected to the slide? The water park shut down the slide permanently and never gave a real explanation. It only posted that it condemned the tragic accident and equipment malfunction. But that doesn't explain the video, or the banging, or the screaming. Doesn't explain how she bypassed the exit or how she ended up in the pool. I'm still trying to figure it out and make sense of it, because none of it makes sense. And the worst part is, we'll never know what really happened to her in that slide, what she saw or felt, or why she was banging and screaming. We just know she went in and never came out the way she was supposed to, and I can't stop thinking about it. This was supposed to be our last summer break before we all headed off to college in different states. David, Jake, and I were determined to make the most of it. The last weekend before the semester, David suggested we check out this huge water park on the edge of town. We thought it was a cool idea, and agreed. The water park was packed with families and little kids screaming all over the place. The main draw was definitely the wave pool, where pretty much everyone hung out, so it was kinda crowded. We started checking out the slides, pools, and the rain dance thing, and only really looked at the wave pool once or twice because it was just so slammed. Around late afternoon, we figured we'd check out the wave pool before heading out. The waves had just died down and the water was super chill. Everyone was just kind of floating and relaxing, except this guy. He was standing in the deep end, staring off into space, still as a statue, while everyone else was moving around, chatting, and laughing. I pointed him out to my friends. "That's messed up," Jake said. We watched him for a minute, but he didn't even twitch. He only stood there in the water up to his chest. "Huh, maybe he's just testing himself. You know, one of those weird endurance things?" David chuckled, trying to make it sound normal, but he looked jumpy too. Just then, the big waves kicked in again, and we totally forgot about the guy. Everyone was jumping, riding the waves and having a blast, but once the waves died down and the water went still, I looked back at the deep end, and the dude was still there in the same spot, staring off in space. I got seriously creeped out. "I'm gonna check something." I took a deep breath, dove underwater, and swam toward the deep end where the man was standing. The water was murky with chlorine stinging my eyes. I coughed and blinked. This time, instead of standing, I found him lying flat on the bottom of the pool, with arms at his sides and eyes wide open, staring up at the surface and at me. I gasped, inhaled water, and panicked. I shot back to the surface, coughing and choking. My friends swam over to check on me. "You okay?"
That guy is at the bottom, lying with his eyes open.
We all looked. The man was standing upright again, right where I'd seen him before. What the hell? We swam back toward the shallow end and away from him. Something was wrong. Really wrong. A few minutes later, a lifeguard blew their whistle with loud, sharp blasts. Everyone had to get out of the pool immediately. We climbed out and stood on the deck, dripping and confused. The lifeguards were talking to each other. I was close enough to hear bits of it.
Didn't we pull a body from here last week?
Yeah, a dude drowned. Why?
Someone just reported seeing a man at the bottom. Same description.
My stomach dropped. The body and the man I'd seen lying at the bottom, it couldn't be the same person, could it? They let everyone back in maybe after 10 minutes, saying it was a false alarm. David and Jake dragged me to the pool again, and we stayed in the shallow end this time. The waves started up again, growing bigger with massive swells lifting everyone up and down. I was riding a wave when it happened, laughing, when I felt ice-cold fingers grab around my ankles hard. They tugged, and I went under, with water rushing past my face. I kicked and tried to break free, but the grip was too strong, with fingers digging into my skin. I opened my eyes underwater. The man was right there in front of me. His face was pale and bloated, with skin gray and waterlogged. His eyes were wide and milky white. His mouth hung open with jaw slacked. He looked like a drowned corpse, but he was moving and pulling me deeper. His fingers were around my ankle like a vice. I screamed with bubbles erupting from my mouth. I twisted and kicked at his face. His head snapped back, but his grip didn't loosen. He kept pulling and dragging me toward the bottom. My lungs were burning. I needed air and surface. I reached down and clawed at his hands. His skin was cold and slimy, like touching something dead. No matter how hard I tried, he wouldn't let go. My ears started ringing. I knew it was only a matter of time before he dragged me under. I thrashed around harder, until I finally kicked him in the nose and yanked my foot free. I kicked him again, right in the chest, and shot towards the surface. I burst out of the water, gasping, coughing, and spitting up pool water. Jake grabbed me and pulled me to the edge.
What happened? He grabbed me, pulled me under.
I looked back at the deep end. The man was gone, as if he'd never been there. But my ankle hurt. I looked down, and sure enough, dark purple marks in the exact shape of fingers glared back. The lifeguards came over, checked my ankle, and asked what happened. I told them about the man and about being pulled under. They exchanged looks and called security. They closed the wave pool for the rest of the day and drained it later that night. They didn't find anything. It's been half a year. The bruises are gone, but that memory is definitely sticking around. I haven't gone back to the water park or even stepped foot in a wave pool since, because I know exactly what went down and what I survived. That dude's dead eyes still stare up at me from underwater, and his cold hands try to grab me. I was booking our surprise honeymoon tickets to Paris when the cops called. They told me my girlfriend Emily, who was supposed to be my wife in 2 weeks, was dead. The official ruling was suicide. But all I could really hear was that the light of my life was gone forever. My whole world shattered. I basically lived in bed for months. I lost my job and became such a wreck that my mom eventually moved in with me just to keep an eye on things. She wouldn't take no for an answer, and stayed until I finally agreed to start seeing a therapist named Daisy every weekend. The first few sessions went fine. I picked up 3 jobs just so I wouldn't be alone with my thoughts. But about 6 months in, Daisy called me out. She said I'd gotten too good at pretending I was recovering without actually doing the work. Her advice was to get out of the city and go somewhere I couldn't distract myself. She pushed this hiking flyer across the table. It was for a weekend retreat in northern Colorado run by a group called Clear Path. The entire thing focused on reconnecting with what matters. It was expensive, but Daisy insisted I needed it. So I paid the non-refundable deposit so I wouldn't back out later. 6 of us met in a parking lot at the trailhead on a Friday afternoon. Richard, our guide, was maybe in his mid-40s, quiet-spoken, and looked like he knew the mountains well. During the introduction, he said the weekend was designed to help us confront what we were running from. Immediately, Emily's face flashed through my mind, and I almost got back into my car. But the deposit was gone either way, so I stayed. The first day was pretty chill. The hike itself was easy, and the group was mostly decent. Thankfully, nobody was trying too hard to become instant best friends. There was a woman named Claire, who kept mostly to herself, a couple from Fort Collins who wouldn't stop talking, and a guy named Brett, who complained about his boots nonstop for the first hour before Richard finally told him to shut up. We set up camp beside a ravine that evening, and I passed out almost immediately. Around midnight, I woke to muffled sobbing somewhere out in the trees. I stayed still for a minute, making sure it was actually a person before I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out of the tent. About 100 feet from camp, Claire stood alone in the darkness, with her back turned to me. She was still wearing her sleep clothes beneath her jacket. "Hey," I called softly. "You all right?" When she turned around, her face looked pale as a corpse and twisted with disgust.
Richard told me what you did.
She sobbed. I froze. "What?" Without another word, she stormed past me and headed back toward camp, while I stood there alone with my flashlight pointed at the dirt, trying to figure out what the hell she meant. I kept telling myself it was nothing. Maybe she'd had a nightmare or overheard some conversation and misunderstood it. By the time I finally crawled back into my sleeping bag, I had almost convinced myself everything was fine. The next morning, though, I knew something was wrong. The second I walked up to any conversation, it died. Everyone stared at me like I'd grown a second head, and whenever Richard caught my eye, he'd give me this strange little smirk, like we shared some secret. I kept trying to tell myself I was being paranoid until I dug through my backpack for my water filter and found a folded piece of paper I knew hadn't been there before. I unfolded it. "We know about Emily." My hands immediately started shaking. Nobody could know anything about Emily. I was sure we'd been the only people there when it happened. Emily and I had been drifting apart for weeks before she died. She'd recently lost her job and wanted to postpone the wedding until things got stabilized. I wanted to move forward with our plans anyway. Our last argument happened on a hiking trail overlooking a ridge maybe 40 minutes from her apartment. She tried to walk away from me, and I grabbed her arm. When she jerked free, she lost her footing on the loose gravel near the edge. I called 911 and waited for the police, but I lied. I told them we'd been hiking separately and that I'd only heard the fall. I never mentioned the argument. Emily was barely breathing when they pulled her out. The investigation lasted 11 days before the police eventually ruled her death a suicide based on things she'd written in her journals. Ever since then, the guilt had been crushing me, but I was positive nobody knew the truth. I didn't sleep at all that night. Around 2 in the morning, I heard Richard whispering to someone outside my tent.
"He still refuses to admit it,"
he said quietly.
"even after all this time."
Without thinking, I lunged from my sleeping bag, grabbed my backpack and headlamp, and bolted into the trees. I just ran. The sun was already rising by the time I stumbled out at the bottom of the trail. I was exhausted and shaking violently when I spotted a ranger station and practically dragged myself inside. The ranger was a woman in her 50s. She listened carefully while I told her everything. When I finished, she typed something into her computer.
"There's no permit for a clear bath retreat this weekend."
I told her she had to be mistaken. She checked again. Still nothing.
"Well, if you've been alone out there, who exactly were you talking to?"
She said carefully. I immediately told her I hadn't been alone. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out the note, and handed it to her. I watched her unfold it with my own eyes. Then she looked back up at me.
"Sir, the paper is blank,"
she said gently. My head started buzzing. I completely broke down, screaming that I wasn't lying. The ranger called 911. I was admitted to a psychiatric ward later that day. Once the medication started working, the entire clear path experience began to dissolve. The guilt had finally broken something in me. Eventually, I confessed everything about the fight with Emily and the lie I told police. But because the official ruling on her death remained suicide, there was never going to be a trial waiting for me. Instead, they admitted me into intensive therapy. Now, I'm learning to live with the reality of what happened, because in the end, my own mind became the jury. I've dreamed of having a perfect hourglass figure ever since I started belly dancing at 12, but I ended up inheriting my mom's lean genes and got a flat butt instead. So when I finally turned 26 and could actually afford butt lift surgery, I felt like I'd won the lottery. I found the clinic through my belly dancing group chat. Priya, a recent joiner, posted some amazing before and after pictures with a referral code, saying the price was insane for the results. Like any normal person, I looked them up. Their website was totally slick and professional. Their social media was constantly updated with posts, client success stories, and procedure details. I checked reviews on 3 different sites and mostly found 4- and 5-star ratings, with only a few complaints that seriously sounded like people hadn't followed the aftercare instructions. I even double-checked the doc's name, and he was totally legit. Once I was satisfied, I booked an appointment. When I showed up, the place looked exactly like the pictures. The floors were spotless. There were framed certificates all over the walls, and a receptionist was right there to help anyone who walked in. She shoved a clipboard at me and told me to fill it out.
Dr. Miller will be here in a sec. Go ahead and get your measurements done.
After I filled out the paperwork, Dr. Miller came out. He walked me through the whole BBL procedure step by step. He covered what to expect after a week, after a month, how the transferred fat actually settles, what's normal for bruising and what isn't. I'd already read enough stuff that I had some real questions, and he answered every single one of them without hesitation. I walked feeling totally reassured, went home, and just counted down the days till the surgery. Dr. Miller was awesome. The surgery itself seemed okay. He really helped calm my nerves too. I woke up sore and wrapped in those compression bandages. A nurse handed me a printout with the aftercare instructions and sent me on my way. The first couple of days were uncomfortable, but I handled it. I stayed in bed, took the pain meds, and followed every single instruction on that sheet. I was being super careful about doing everything right. On the 3rd day, I noticed the faint, sour smell oozing out. I told myself it was the bandages, maybe the topical ointment. I changed the dressing the way I'd been shown and tried not to spiral, but on day 4, it was stronger. I pressed gently around the surgical site and felt a warmth that was different from bruising. I called the clinic. Dr. Miller's answer was pleasant and quick. Some odor during healing is completely normal. Continue the aftercare regimen and call back if the pain increases significantly. I asked about the color change I was seeing. Some discoloration is expected with bruising, Mia. Give it a few more days. That's exactly what I did. By day 5, my skin looked weird. Instead of the purple and yellow bruising the doctor had talked about, it was a grayish-brown patch spreading from the center of where I got the shot, with uneven, almost splotchy edges. It looked like I was rotting from the inside. I snapped a picture and shot it over to the clinic's contact number, saying I was worried and needed them to call me back, but they didn't respond. I called again and got bounced to voicemail. I left a long message explaining how worried I was and begged them to call me ASAP. But a whole day went by, and I didn't hear a word. I even tried the second number on their website. It just kept ringing. I barely slept that night because of the pain. It was a deep ache that felt like something was building up inside of me with nowhere to go. By morning, I had a fever and could hardly move. The smell got so bad that I moved to the couch and threw open every window in the apartment. My sister drove me to the hospital. The ER doctor who examined me called in a colleague. They stepped near the door and spoke in low voices for a few minutes while I lay on the table staring at the ceiling. When they came back, their faces were pale. The substance injected during your procedure was not medical-grade filler. It was cooking oil. I heard the words and I knew what each one meant. It still took a second for them to actually connect and make sense to me. He broke down exactly what cooking oil does inside your body, how the tissue freaks out when it can't break down some foreign crap, and how that's when the tissue starts dying. He kept repeating the words necrosis. We've started the treatment, but the final result will really depend on how fast we can fix the damage that's already there. I asked him if parts of me were dying. He didn't deny it. I've had 2 surgeries since that day, and there probably will be a third. The people who ran that clinic took the deposits, dissolved the business, and disappeared. My lawyer says cases like these are hard to prosecute because the entities vanish before there's anything solid to attach to. So, right now, nobody has been held accountable for what they put inside my body. I think about the group chat constantly, about the referral code, the person who posted those before and after photos, and whether they knew about the methods. And I think about how many other women clicked that same link, sat in the same clean waiting room, signed those same forms, and went home waiting for a call that was never going to come. I was one of them. The only difference is, I'm still here to talk about it. Ruth and I have been married for 6 years, and I'd be lying if I said the last 2 hadn't been a little rough. Not in a bad marriage kind of way, more like a ships passing in the night kind of way. She runs brand strategy at a mid-sized agency in Charlotte and got promoted to director around the same time I left my corporate job to get my logistics software company off the ground. Suddenly, we were both working 80-hour weeks, and most of our real conversations happened over cold takeout at 10 o'clock at night. So, when a project she'd been running for 8 months wrapped ahead of schedule on a Thursday and she called me during lunch to say she had a long weekend free, I closed my laptop and told her to start packing. We drove down to western North Carolina that same evening and found a motel in a small town called Brevard. That night, we had a real dinner together for the first time in probably 3 months. The hiking was actually her idea. There was a trail map in the motel lobby with a route circled in pen and a handwritten note taped beside it that read, "Worth it." Neither of us were serious hikers, but we had the boots and the time, so we figured, why not? We hit the trail early Saturday morning. The first few hours were exactly what we needed. The air felt clean, and for once, our phones were off. A couple of hours in, Ruth stopped and pointed out that we'd missed the trail marker we were supposed to watch for at least 20 minutes earlier. Neither of us had realized we'd hiked that far past it. "It's fine. The sun's still up. We can find our way back easily," I told her as I started walking again. About an hour later, I noticed everything had gone completely silent. The birds had stopped chirping. Even the wind wasn't moving through the trees. Ruth instinctively grabbed my hand and slowed down.
Ethan?
She pointed with a shaky finger. I followed her gaze and spotted a figure standing between the trees about 30 feet ahead of us. At first, I thought it was another hiker who'd stopped to check their phone or look at something. Then, the woman stepped farther into view, and I actually saw her. My stomach dropped. She was barefoot, wearing a thin, pale green hospital gown. The entire front of it was smeared with dirt and what looked like dried blood. A plastic hospital wristband still hung from her left wrist. Then, I noticed her neck. A row of stitches ran along the side of it, maybe 3 inches long. The skin around them looked bruised and swollen, as if the wound had been stitched recently. It took me a second to find my voice. I called out, asking if she was okay and whether she needed help. She glanced at Ruth first, before her eyes settled on me, and then she smiled.
You should come with me. I want to show you something.
Ruth immediately stepped in front of me.
Step back.
The woman's smile widened. Then she started clapping and laughing to herself like a lunatic. Between bursts of laughter, she slowly raised one hand and pointed toward a gnarly, crooked tree off to our left.
After I'm done taking your husband, I'll hang your body from that tree.
Ruth stiffened beside me. My skin crawled. We turned around and hurried back down the trail as fast as we could, without outright running. Behind us, we could hear her bare feet brushing through the leaves. She was following us, softly humming some kind of children's tune. Every few seconds, she said my name and begged me to stop and come with her.
I really have to show it. Come with me.
At first, her voice stayed calm and almost gentle, but the farther we got, the more it began to crack and warp until she sounded furious and desperate all at once. Then, she bolted. She grabbed me from behind and locked her arms around my chest. Her grip was impossibly tight. Even though I'm 5'5" and she was barefoot with fresh stitches in her neck, she dragged me sideways off the trail like I weighed nothing. Ruth was screaming beside me, and I was yelling and clawing at the woman's arms, desperate to break free, but I couldn't. My boots slid helplessly through the dirt. She'd nearly dragged me past the tree line when I heard a loud crack. Her arms went limp instantly, and she dropped like a stone. Ruth had grabbed a fallen branch from the ground and smashed it against the side of the woman's head. We ran the rest of the way back to the car without stopping. Ruth called 911 from the parking area while I sat in the passenger seat with my hands shaking, trying to remember how to breathe. We kept telling ourselves she was probably some escaped psychiatric patient who wandered onto the trail, because that was the only explanation that made any sense. Officers searched that section of the trail later that night. They combed through the entire area, including around that crooked tree she'd pointed at. All they found was the hospital gown lying in the dirt where she'd fallen. It was soaked through with blood. They found no sign of the woman herself, no footprints, no trail leading away. The wristband was still lying on the ground beside the gown. When they ran the ID, it came back to a patient who'd been discharged from a facility about 90 miles west a few days earlier. Current whereabouts unknown. I've gone back and forth ever since over what she actually was, but the truth is, I genuinely don't know. Life eventually slipped back into the usual grind of endless meetings and late-night takeout, but every now and then, in the dead of night or whenever we try to plan another getaway, the memory of that woman creeps back into our heads, and it always leads us to the same questions we can't answer. Who was she? What exactly did she want? And what the hell was she so desperate to show me? I had recently moved to Chicago for a promotion, and honestly, work had become pretty much my whole life. I barely knew anyone outside the office. Being 26 and 1,000 miles from home, the loneliness was seriously getting to me. I was desperate for anything familiar, so when they announced the World Cup semifinal, I booked a ticket within the hour. The day of the semifinal, I called out of work, hopped the train downtown solo, and sat there in my seat with a hamburger and a beer. The game was actually wild. Soldier Field was totally packed, and the energy in that place was exactly the kick I needed. I was so sucked into the match that I didn't realize I had knocked back 4 beers by halftime, twice my usual amount, until my bladder started bursting. I still waited until halftime before I left my seat. The lines in my section were a total nightmare. They were backed up past the concession stands and looked like at least a 10-minute wait. I figured I'd just start walking. I was sure that if I went far enough into the concourse, I'd eventually find a bathroom that wasn't totally slammed. Listening to some Coldplay through my earbuds, I ended up walking way farther than I planned. Stadium corridors are always a mess, twisting and turning in ways that make zero sense unless you already know the layout, which I didn't. I went down some ramp I hadn't seen before, and the crowd noise started dropping off. Suddenly, I was in a hallway that was dead quiet, with bare concrete walls and a buzzing fluorescent light. There were no food stands, signs, or anyone else around. I was about to turn around and head back when my eyes fell on a closed restroom door at the end of the hallway, where an older-looking security guard stood. Without thinking much of it, I walked right up and told him I really had to go, asking if there was a line.
Restroom's closed for maintenance. You'll need to head back up to the main concourse.
The guard grumbled. Man, I really can't wait that long. I've been walking for 10 minutes and I'm desperate. I'd be in and out in 30 seconds. I'm sorry, I can't let anyone in. He stepped slightly to the left, centering himself directly in the doorway, and I noticed the inconsistencies I would have otherwise ignored. His uniform was 2 sizes too big. The shoulders were way too wide, and the sleeves practically swallowed his hands. He was also sweating buckets, which was bizarre because it was freezing down there. And he kept peeking at the door behind him, as if he were making sure whatever was inside stayed there. I made a joke about wetting myself because I didn't know what else to do with the weird energy coming off him. He laughed, but I could tell he was faking it. I held my hands up and told him I'd back off. He nodded and tilted his head just a tiny bit, but it was enough for me to catch a glimpse of what was behind him. The door wasn't locked shut. Through the crack, I saw some kind of red syrup smeared across the floor. I squinted and caught sight of a pair of bare legs, completely still. My brain took a full second to process it. My eyes widened and my heart started pounding. When I looked back up, he was already staring me down. His expression hadn't changed, but his eyes were narrowed, and I saw his knuckles go white around the grip of his security baton. I fumbled out something about finding another bathroom upstairs. I really tried to keep my voice level as I turned and started walking casually. My legs felt like jelly, and I had to keep reminding myself to walk normally.
You saw the body, didn't you?
He whispered. Without wasting a second, I took off running as fast as I could. My lungs were on fire, and my breath was coming out ragged. I was yelling for help, but there was nobody in the hall to hear me. I could hear him behind me. I risked a glance back and saw he was closing the gap, fast. He had a sick grin on his face while he chased me. Suddenly, he swung his baton and caught me across the shoulder blade. I yelped and stumbled. Pain shot through my left side. He was only a couple of feet away. I managed to catch my balance and hit the next corner as fast as I could. I sprinted straight into 3 officers standing by the concession stand at the end of the hall and slammed into the middle one so hard that we almost both wiped out on the floor. I desperately grabbed at his jacket and pointed back down the hallway while trying to explain that there was a body in the bathroom and the killer was right behind me. The 2 cops ran past me, but the guy didn't slow down or put his hands up. It took all 3 officers to finally wrestle him down and slap the cuffs on. He fought the whole time. Turns out the actual security guard was the one inside the bathroom. He'd been covering that specific hallway when the psycho jumped him. He'd planned to steal the uniform, rob as many people as he could, and flee. Investigators told me later that he'd spent weeks scoping out the stadium, figuring out the staff schedules and blind spots so he knew exactly where to operate unseen. I didn't go back in for the second half. I could hardly pay attention to anything when my mind was still stuck in that hallway and the nightmare I had just escaped. I couldn't sleep for a whole week. My manager was understanding after I told him what had happened and gave me 15 days off so I could visit my family and try and forget about it. It's been nearly a year, and I still can't stop reliving it every single day. I still think about that crack in the door, the blood on the floor, and the innocent guy who lost his life doing his job. The darkness in the world makes me sick, and I always wonder what he would have done to me if I'd stayed frozen for 1 second longer. I've been a financial auditor at Mercer & Klein Consulting, right on Michigan Avenue in downtown Chicago, for a little over 3 years now. I started right after earning my MBA from DePaul, and I'd only recently landed a promotion during the last review cycle. But with more money came a ridiculous increase in responsibility. Whenever quarterly close rolled around, I was drowning in spreadsheets and compliance reports long after everyone else had gone home. Sometimes I'd still see the cleaning crew, but past midnight, I was lucky if 2 or 3 other people remained in the entire building. It was a Monday night, and I was the only person left on the floor. My phone read 1:30 a.m. I'd been there since 7 that morning, surviving almost entirely on caffeine. I only had about 40 minutes of work left, So I saved my files, grabbed my laptop bag, turned off my desk lamp, and headed for the elevators. The building has 32 floors above ground and 2 basement parking levels. I pressed the L button for the lobby, but the second the door shut, the lights overhead started flickering. I was about to hit the help button when the elevator suddenly lurched downward. For the first 40 seconds, the floor counter ticked down normally. I waited for it to reach L, but instead, it slowed far too early and stopped on a symbol I'd never seen before. It looked vaguely like a number, but not from any language I recognized. Before I could even think about pressing the help button again, the elevator stopped. The doors slid open. I stepped out into a hallway so massive it couldn't possibly have fit inside the building above me. The ceiling had to be at least 60 feet high, lined with dim blue lights that pulsed slowly overhead. The walls looked organic, almost like living tissue, subtly expanding and contracting as if they were breathing. The air smelled like copper mixed with some strange chemical sweetness that immediately made me nauseous. Far down the corridor, behind a thick translucent panel, I could see dark shapes floating in liquid, while enormous mechanical structures rotated silently around them. I was still trying to process what I was looking at when I heard footsteps echo from somewhere to my right. I turned and saw several figures emerging from the shadows. They were tall and impossibly thin, with pale gray skin stretched tightly over elongated limbs. Their heads tilted at angles that didn't look physically possible, and they moved in perfect synchronization. I blinked. Suddenly, one of them broke from the group and sprinted directly towards me. As it passed beneath the overhead lights, each one exploded beneath it in rapid succession. Pop, pop, pop. My heart nearly stopped. I screamed, turned around, and bolted back toward the elevator. But the hallway had changed. A doorway that had been on my left moments earlier was gone now, replaced by a smooth, seamless wall. The floor beneath my shoes felt softer now, almost spongy, with a strange give beneath each step. Then I heard the screaming. Human voices echoed from somewhere deep within the structure, distorted by distance, but unmistakably filled with pain. I was crying at that point, completely panicking. I could feel the thing chasing me behind the darkness, but I refused to look back. I slammed into the elevator doors, hit the call button repeatedly, and pressed myself against the wall beside them until they finally slid open. I threw myself inside and mashed every button on the panel. The doors shut, and everything went pitch black. I woke up to a security guard crouched beside me, with absolutely no memory of what happened after the doors closed. Apparently, hours had passed before they found me unconscious on the elevator floor in the lobby. The overnight guard noticed the elevator sitting idle on the security cameras and went to investigate. They called an ambulance, and I spent the rest of the night at Northwestern Memorial being tested for a concussion and a possible heart attack. Every test came back completely normal. The nurse kept asking if I'd taken any drugs, and I kept telling her I hadn't. Eventually, she wrote exhaustion and syncope on my discharge papers, which felt like the medical equivalent of saying, "I have no idea what happened to you." For a while, I genuinely tried convincing myself it had all been some kind of stress-induced hallucination, but the next morning, the building manager pulled the elevator logs and showed them to me in his office. According to the system, the elevator traveled directly from the 32nd floor to the lobby in exactly 40 seconds and remained there for the rest of the night. Then he showed me the building blueprints. There were 2 documented basement parking levels beneath the tower, nothing else. No hidden floors, no sublevels, nothing. But when the paramedics examined my shoes in the elevator, both soles were coated in a thick, black, oily substance, smeared across them as though I'd walked through it. The hospital sent samples to 2 separate labs. Neither one could identify the compound. It didn't match any known industrial material, lubricant, solvent, or adhesive in either database. I still work in that building. I'm planning to stay another year so I can leverage the experience into something better and leave all of this behind. But I take the stairs every single day now, no matter how many flights I have to climb or how late I'm working. My coworkers ask about it sometimes, and I just tell them that I'm trying to stay in shape. A few of them have even started taking the stairs with me. I've never told anyone there what actually happened. The story requires people to believe in things that don't exist on any blueprint, and I am an auditor. My entire job revolves around making sure reality aligns with documentation. But I know what I saw on the other side of those elevator doors. And I also know there's absolutely no record of it existing anywhere. Those two facts have been sitting side by side in my head for months now, and I still haven't figured out which one scares me more.